Yes. He said that's.
Get started.
All right.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the governing committee members for being here in person. This is a great opportunity. We always like to see each other face to face and have a good meeting with a lot of good outcomes. So before we get into roll call, I would like to recognize a few people that we have in attendance this morning. The first one is Dominic Sims, our CEO of ICC. So welcome. Thank you. Don't know if you have any, not to put you on the spot, but if you had any thing that you wanted to share to the group or.
Pearls of wisdom, make sure you have an umbrella.
Good point. Thank you very much. And then we have Director Stuart Tom. Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
And Director Randy Metz. And I think that's, oh, sorry, past President Dwayne Garris in the back. All right, with that then, in lieu of Carl calling out names for roll call, I would like to just have everyone go around the room. So Rick, I'll start with you.
Rick Weisberg, I'm the fire marshal in Brighton, Southeast Michigan.
Great.
Andy King, Fire Marshal, Franklin, Tennessee, representing the Southeastern Fire Chiefs.
I'm DJ Hyde with Rogers Fire Department in Arkansas. And it's been a while. Fire Marshal Building Official representing Southwest.
Ed Kaminsky, I'm a fire protection engineer at Clark County Fire Department in Las Vegas.
Larry Medina, I'm a Deputy State Fire Marshal for the Oregon State Fire Marshal, and I'm representing Western Fire Chief.
Sean Toomey, State Fire Marshal in Hampton, representing NASA.
Kelly Nicholo, UL Solutions, past State Fire Marshal for Alaska, representing ICC.
Brian Adams, Fire Marshal for Pleasant Valley Fire District in Central Ohio.
Doug Nelson, North Dakota State Fire Marshal, representing NASA.
Jonathan Lund, Fire Marshal, One Iowa, representing Missouri Valley.
Michael Desrochers, Vermont State Fire Marshal, President of NASA, representing NASA here on council. Nice to see everybody today.
Tim Diehl, Building Security Manager, Howard County, Maryland, representing the United States.
Representing ICC.
Carl Fippinger, Vice President, Fire and Disaster Mitigation, ICC's Government Relations Department, I'm your staff liaison.
Randy Metz, Fire Marshal, Carlsbad Fire Department, and I'm your ICC Board Liaison. West Van, CEFP for Technical Services at ICC.
Yeah, Shapiro, I'll pass on some words of wisdom that Paul gave me many years ago. Like you go from who's that to who's who to who cares. I'm in stage 3.
How do you follow that? Stuart Tom, Vice President of the Board of Directors.
Bobby Dawson with NFPA. Wayne Garris, retired State Fire Marshal of Georgia, actually here representing fire equipment manufacturers.
I'm John Sims. Tim Schmitz, ICC Government Relations.
Bill Nash, ICC Government Relations.
Rick Hoppy, ICC Government Relations and Staff Liaison with the Emerging Leaders Membership Council.
Ty Jennings, just representing as a member of the ELMC this morning.
Great. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. And those that are on virtual.
So those that are on virtually, we'll start with Gary West. Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary West. I'm representing the National Association of State Fire Marshals as a staff member.
Fantastic. Thank you. John Harmon.
Josh Harmon, I'm the liaison with the Sustainability Membership Council, and I'm from the building official for Clinton County, Ohio.
And finally, Bob Sullivan.
Bob Sullivan, Southwest Regional Director for NFPA.
Thanks for getting up early to join us, Bob.
All
Yeah, the
right,
coffee
thank you
pot's
all.
working overtime.
Bob's in Colorado.
All right, we're going to move on and have our guest presentation. We're going to refer it back to Russ from ICC.
Great, thanks. So we've got a little slide that we're gonna go through, a couple slides, just don't, can you get the back one? Absolutely. So just a little plug this afternoon from, I think, 3 to 5, we're gonna be doing a much more deeper dive into this as well as standards and guides. But we wanted to take this opportunity to go over this with you guys and have a chance to talk to you a little bit about it. It looks a little ugly now, trust me, once we hit play, it looks a whole lot sexier. But we wanted to have an opportunity to say hello, talk about the process. Obviously, this community is a very important part of code development process, and hopefully everybody knows we're moving into the next cycle in 2024 through 26. So if you can hit play on that for me. This is just going to go through a little bit of the motion. The current cycle, you probably know what we've gone through there, Group A, Group B. A lot of the things are the same in the process as we have it right now. What we're trying to do here is to show you what some of the major changes are that are going to occur. We're in year 3 right now, so the team is very aggressively working to get things published for the 2024 code. The next cycle will publish the 2027. But in the next cycle, what we're doing is we're taking the PCH and the OGCB and we're consolidating those into year 3. What that actually allows us to do is it allows us to introduce the second CAH into both Group A and Group B. But other than that, things are staying the same. But that one little change is a pretty big change in the overall scheme of how we're putting things together. So if you look at the next slide, this is really where people have asked a lot of questions. So at the end of the day, what does it mean when we do second CAH? Well, that gives us the opportunity to take advantage of the subject matter expertise that we have up on the dais, the committee folks that are applying right now. So again, if you're not aware of that, hopefully you are. But we have the applications for the 2024 through 2026 cycle open. One thing that is different in that this year is in the past, you used to print a form out, fill it out, scan it, and send it back into us. The whole thing's moved online. And the reason we've done that is folks have asked if we can get a decision back sooner to everybody about when, or letting everybody know who's been selected so that you can plan. Well, in order for us to do that, we had to do something that allowed us to do it quicker. And that online form is what's allowing us to move it ahead. Our target goal is that instead of getting the proposals for the selections for the committee to take some processes that were taking us about a month and a half, we need to get it down to 3 days. So that's a pretty big crunch for us. We think we can certainly do that. But that is our response to the request that we've got to try and let you know sooner. So we're hoping that sometime around the August timeframe, everybody will know who's been selected for the committee. So let me get back to this. So what's different? If we take out this comment and the second CAH and you look at this, it's the same exact process we've had in years past. But here's what's going to happen once we put in the second CAH. The committee is going to make a decision, same as in the past. It's either as submitted, as modified, or disapproved. We're going to take that, put that together, put it out for public comment. People will be able to go back into CDP access and they'll be able to put comments in. If it gets no comments, right? So the board or the committee makes a decision. And let's say it goes into the committee as submitted. It gets no comments in that cycle. It automatically goes to the consensus agenda. Again, very similar to what happened in the public comments. Where if you got no comment, it went to the consent agenda. Excuse me. If it does get a comment, and that comment doesn't have to be a lengthy comment. It just has I disagree with the committee. Right? It can be as simple as that. I disagree with the committee. We need to talk about this. The committee didn't know what they were doing. You know, we can get comments like that sometimes. But the point is, it doesn't need to be complicated. It'll go into the second CAH. What that means is the committee is going to hear it again. And that gives the proponents and the opponents the opportunity, hopefully, to do some work between here and here. Because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to provide an opportunity for an iterative discussion to build that consensus, which is what we're all about. Having transparency, but also being able to take advantage of, again, that subject matter expert panel that we have. So for instance, in the past, the committee might not like some of what was proposed, and they may say disapproved for some very specific reasons. Well, this gives the proponent the opportunity to take that guidance from the committee, go back, work on it a little bit, resubmit the changes, and then hopefully they've made the corrections. The committee's like, yes, this is what we're looking for. These are the changes we're recommending. And again, at that point, it will go into public comment. And once you get to this stage, same process we had before. If it gets no public comments, it's going to go straight to the consent agenda. If it does get a public comment, then it'll go into the individual consideration. So one of the things that people keep asking me is, how do I get to the individual consideration? Well, again, same as in the past. If it gets no comment, it's not going to get there. But if it gets comments, it'll work its way over to the individual consent or the individual consideration agenda. After that, it's going to go to the OGCB. And again, keep in mind that this is what's happening now in year 3. So when we do the PCH, we'll be considering comments that came through from both Group A and Group B together in that same meeting. OGCB will be the same. We'll be doing that online through CEFP access, but we'll be considering all of the comments that went through Group A. Yep. So one other thing that's in there that is different, we think this is, it's not a big change, but it's a significant change. So in the past, you could get disapproved at the CAH, you could get disapproved at the PCH, you could go to the OGCB, and then it could get passed because there might be a bunch of people. What we've done now is, you might hear me say 3 strikes rule. We're calling it 3 disapprovals rule, but it essentially, if your proposal gets disapproved at CAH 1, at CAH 2, and at the combined public comment hearing, the individual consideration hearing, that means you got 3 disapprovals. There's probably something wrong with the code. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but it probably just means the way it's structured or maybe isn't the best time to put it in the code. So if that happens, it will not go to the OGCB. What we're really trying to do with this is a couple things. One, we're trying to make sure that we don't have bad code show up. Because, you know, folks at the OGCB, for one reason or another, approved it, when the folks that were voting earlier probably had more knowledge and understanding of what the actual code was and the implications, disapproved it. The other thing is this is really trying to encourage that collaborative, iterative development process. So if you have a disapproval of CAH1, again, we've introduced the second CAH. So we're looking for people to really try and do as much collaboration between CAH1 and CAH2 as possible. And you still have the opportunity between the last CAH and the last CAH and the PCH to actually do some collaboration and try and get it resolved. The other thing is, if we can go back one slide. This is the quickest path to get to approval, right, across the top. So what we're really trying to do is encourage people to put as much homework in as you can. You're getting it right at this point. If it's a good code change, you can get it approved. You collaborate with people that might be potential opponents. If you can get it through here and you've made everybody happy, it gets them comments, that's the easiest pathway to get to approval because you're going to the consensus at that stage. So we're really trying to encourage folks to collaborate. We're trying to make sure that we have good code and appropriate code. And the other thing is, quite frankly, if you can go back one more slide, you'll notice we have this much time to publish now. In the new process, we've lost 3 to 4 months. So we're counting both technology and the fact that hopefully a lot more is going to go to the consent agenda in this process so that we can start processing stuff a little bit sooner before we get to the PCH. If everything goes to the PCH, guys and gals back in the office are going to be crunching for time. But again, that's what I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I want to open it up and see if you guys have any questions or comments. If not, again, from 3 to 5 today, we're going to spend some time going into this in more detail. We're going to talk about the standards process. We're going to talk about the guidance process. And I guess we'll open it up for questions. Jeff.
Go to the next slide. So, not sure anybody in this group will probably remember, this actually originated with our Service Membership Council quite a ways back. We were the ones that pushed this into the process. On the voting, I guess it was the next slide, Carl. The 3 strikes rule. I'm trying to remember, was that the way LTCDP recommended it to the board, or did the board change that? I don't remember that LTCDP said if you didn't get approval at stage 3, you can't get to online. I remember we discussed it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go look, to be honest with you, Jeff, because I did not have the history on this particular one. I made the assumption it came through the long-term code development committee, but I'd have to go read it.
Okay, it may have, I don't remember that, but my thought is that the idea was to avoid, we'll call it gaming the system with regard to bringing a 2/3 vote or at final action hearing. I would just like to offer up and ask for comment. To me, the only way to really even further limit that is if you get disapproved at the first 2 hearings by the committee, you would need a 3/4 vote at the public comment hearing to overcome a double vote, not a 2/3. Because 2/3 is still reasonably within the range of somebody manipulating the outcome, as opposed to 3/4 pretty much shuts that down.
Yes, I sort of look at this like all good process improvements, it's incremental change. We think we've made the change to address the underlying problem. We'll see how things go in this cycle. There's quite a few things in here that frankly from our side, we're just trying to keep an eye on. If you can go back 1 slide before this. The number that go this route versus this route, or at least over to the consent agenda versus what we've seen in the past. We're counting on that happening for publication reasons. If that doesn't happen, we're probably gonna need to make some tweaks somehow to facilitate ensuring that we get the code out in time. I think relative to the 3 disapprovals, we will same thing. We are trying to address some specific things that have happened in the past that we don't think are good practice. That are not good for the code world, that are not good for us on the code enforcement side. And even though I had 1 slide, sorry to keep jumping around. Just so you slide my fingers. Yeah. There we go. I agree with you, Jeff. I mean, that's the primary reason we're doing this, is to make sure that, the folks that are involved in it, that are heavily involved in it, are not having an in-run done at the OGCP. But, to your point, we think it's a good fix. If it doesn't work, we'll have to, continue to, I keep looking at this as a continuous process improvement. Yeah, sure.
So in light of having the 2 cause, what is going to be the appetite for entertaining modifications at the meeting itself?
So at the second CAH?
First or second. I mean, whereas
well,
oftentimes people try to write code from the dais and or entertain multiple modifications happening from the floor as appropriately provided for. But in lieu of doing all that, just with the number one cause, now that we have the second meeting, will the committees be instructed to entertain as modifications or?
Yes, we still have the ability to do it. Some of the pre-training that we're going to do with the committees is trying to help them understand that we're not trying to write code from the dais. We're trying to evaluate, give good feedback, and let the proponent and the opponent go work on it and take a look at it at the second CAH. A couple of reasons for that. Primary ones, quite frankly, is time.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't been involved in it probably. I assume most of you have been doing this for quite a while. I've only been exposed to it for a 1.5 years now. And what I've seen is when they start trying to read the code from the dais, lots and lots of time. That's not something we do.
Yeah. So just second question.
Sure.
What's your publication anticipation date for the codes? Because everybody's working on, you know, from the FCACs and the BCACs, and they're all having to go back into the system and try and figure out what was approved in the 24, so they can apply it to the 27. People are working from the 21s to kind of do that.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
So you mean the 2024 code? When do we think we're gonna get that up?
Yes.
So we're looking at sometime fall of this year, October. It's not gonna be before October, but we're looking around October for most of them. Anything that's on the energy or sustainability side is not gonna be until 2024. The ICC, whether it's commercial or residential, it's not gonna happen until first quarter of 2020.
Yeah, I think the IBC and the ISC are really the two big considerations. They're the two biggest books out there, you know, the
Yeah.
biggest amount of people working on.
The way everything's tracking right now, we're looking again sometime around October, November timeframe, we're shooting for October. You know, I've used, the codes for many, you know, 2 decades. I've used the codes, in the jobs that I've been in. So coming to this side of the curtain and seeing how sausage gets made is one heck of a dialogue experience for me. You know, the team, again, is working very diligently to try and get there. We think we're on track for depending on how things go. And it's not gonna be everything but the energy codes all on the same day. We're gonna, as we get stuff that we can roll it out there, we get it out there so people can start to.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up comment for Kelly and others at the table. If you have code development activities that you're working on, Beth Tubbs has got a really great presentation on the 2024s in terms of what's coming in while we're still in correlation, but there are proof changes at this point. So if you need those, I've got that, and I would just ask for permission to share that. But if you need it for highlights and things.
And she has made it known that she could get into the system and grab stuff as we need to. It's just not a very friendly way to do business if you're doing code development, that's all. Not having the votes in front of you when you work, that's all. It is what it is.
We're trying to figure out how we can speed things up. I will tell you, you know, in the back end, we're making the transition right now, but you put things in CDP access, and then we have this other tool called the code correlation tool. That tool was a good step forward, has a bunch of bugs that we've been trying to straighten out, making a transition in there. That, you know, cross our fingers, not going to with everything else we can think of to make sure the IT side of the house works out. But if it goes the way we're thinking, that'll help speed the process up for us too. So when I said that there's 2 things, you know, shortening the time frame, we're counting on 2 things. One, process, 4 things going to the consent agenda. And the second thing was technology. This fix for the CCT, it's one of the things that we're banking. So let's make sure that
the other question that might follow up and be of use to folks in the room is how often are you doing the feeds to digital codes, our digital code solution, where you can see where the changes are and actually drive to the code change proposals?
So
like one with the 24s that we showed.
Yeah, so again, that's tied to the code correlation tool. Pretty much the way the process works now is we're running through this, you know, code correlation tool with the CCT that we talked about. That dumps it into digital codes. So it gets there first, but it also feeds over to our printing side. Right now, there's some, once it gets sent to the printing side, there's some stuff they have to do to get it printable. When we make this transition to the new technology, it's going to cut that another step out. So we think it's going to be much more aligned to at the same time it shows up, roughly the same time it shows up in digital codes. We'll have the print available. So there's not so much of a lag. Because I know people like hard copies.
I'm personally happy with the digital. I can search much quicker than my thumbs can move, so.
Yeah.
Well, the benefit there that I was alluding to is that Susan Dowdy and I have done some teaching at California Fire Prevention Institute and some other places where we've highlighted the ability to be able to go in, look at that digital tool, and then drive right to the code change proposal and even drive right to the video from the dais, right? So, you know, it's kind of a comprehensive piece where you might have to have 3 or 4 different things kind of open on your screens or on your desk at one point. You can drive right to it. So it's helpful in that way as well.
Yeah, if you guys don't know Joan O'Neill, she's a lady that runs, she's our chief knowledge officer, and she runs the whole visual side. I mean, what Joan's doing is awesome. Every week there's something new coming out. We're gonna allude to this a little bit tomorrow, when we're doing our presentation, but when the 2024 code comes out, there's some changes in it. A couple significant ones, currently the code is 2 columns on one page, it's gonna be one single column on the page, so that's gonna look a little bit different. But the big thing that, we're trying to help people is in the old code, if there was a change, there were the margin markers, it's just a marker to say, hey, something changed here. You don't know what changed, but something changed. At the top of each section, if that section had a change, there's going to be a QR code. You can either take your phone or there's a little, I think it's like a 6-digit number you can put in to a link that's available. That'll take you right to the digital codes and to the section. And once you're in digital codes, it'll actually show you what change. So if there's been something that's been added, it's going to be highlighted. So we're trying to make it easier, quicker for people to understand what the changes were. The other thing is we're trying to make it easier for you to navigate. If you're a hard copy person, but we still, there's a lot of good benefits, as was mentioned, to digital codes. We're trying to make it easier for you to navigate there and get to the position you have. So take advantage of it. Another thing that we just started working on, so it's not going to be available when the 2024 code comes out, but we do roughly about 278,000 code opinions a year. What we're trying to do is link some of those code opinions that are coming in that are repetitive, or it's it's a really good question. We have an answer and we want to make sure it's consistent. We're putting that into the digital codes premium. And we're calling it digital answers, but the other thing is we'll be able to see, okay, well, here's a question we get a lot in this particular part of the code. Here's the actual opinion. So there's a lot of benefits to going online, getting used to how digital codes works. And again, Joan and team are just every week it seems like they're rolling out something better, where they're linking information together. Yes, sir.
To Jeff's question, so we did have that discussion in long-term code development when the triple D came up, but it was not part of the actual proposal to the board. We did discuss it at the board level when we approved this new process. That particular issue was tabled and it was brought back on a subsequent action to the board when we authorized the triple D process at that time.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't recall.
No, it was not in, I went back and checked this now. It was not in the actual physical proposal that long-term brought forward to the board initially.
Mike and I tried to do a really good mind melt, but there's only so much you can melt with that. There's so much up in his brain.
Helpful because I was having a hard time reconciling. I don't remember that we came to a conclusion on that. Okay, we didn't.
So are there any other questions? I know you guys have other stuff you want to talk about, but obviously happy to answer any questions. Appreciate the opportunity to come say hello.
I'll throw one at you too, because we have members from different organizations here, including International Association of Fire Chiefs and the National Association of State Fire Marshals. So maybe if you could just highlight high level, I'll be glad to follow in detail about what we talked about in terms of submitting the for code development committees to their organizations so they can carry that back and do a reminder.
Yeah, so again, we have the call for committees out there. So if you have set aside by 1 June, absolutely latest, because if we don't get this done by 1 June of this year, that acceleration that I was talking about, it's not going to be able to happen. We're going to be waiting on the set aside. Two things need to happen. One, you need to identify who your set aside is. Second thing is this set aside no later than June 1 have to go on the online form apply, because we need the information else and get to consent to that. If that doesn't happen, I got to wait until they get in there before I can move things forward. So speeding things up is a team effort. We're trying to do what we can on our side, but more in the system to apply or even identify.
So I'll be sending a reminder and an update to, I know that Greg has, just for Andy, Greg has already submitted a package and we're kind of working through the details of that. So IAFC's fire and life safety section piece is is moving already. I'll work with Gary West and the folks at NASM to make sure that your piece is handled, but wanted to make sure that you all heard that here and kind of report that back as well. So I'll do the follow-up on that and make sure that it's fully coordinated with Russ, but we wanted to make sure you heard that message here today.
Yeah, I think, I forget which organization it was, but we did get one, at least the names identified so far. But, yeah. Thank you guys until next year.
Great. Okay, before we move on the agenda, I just wanted to recognize and thank them for their attendance. Director Angie Weesey, good morning. And Director Michael Savage, thank you. Thanks for being here. So moving on, opening remarks. I have other things down on the agenda. Go to any additions to the agenda. Then I will call for approval of the minutes to the March 16th meeting.
So moved.
Second. Sorry, did I hear a second?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Just a quick note on that too, sent out last night, with the draft minutes, copy of Chief O'Brien's presentation from last month on EVs. You'll find in that attachment, he's also included a QR code within that presentation. So make sure that you scan that QR and go to he's got a couple of Google Drive folders set up with literally everything that he's collected from every presentation that he's done all the way to every piece of resource material that's in there too. If you have questions on it, let me know, but those links are in his presentation that came out to you last.
So next item is our work group updates. So this is the opportunity for work groups to give an update report on your progress of your goals and open it up for any discussion from the group about any of the projects that they're working on. So the first item is member engagement. Brian?
Yeah, so just kind of a overview and update on membership engagement. Some of our overarching, I'll just kind of go through our goals one by one for the year and then kind of where we are for those goals. The first one and the biggest one, I think, for the year is increasing membership participation and engagement in our monthly meetings, which, has been kind of an ongoing process and has improved over time. I think kind of going back to and starting with Gary West and Andy King and some of the other individuals that have worked on getting presenters at the beginning of our meeting, just like we had this morning, so that we can drive some of that engagement and participation in our FSMC monthly meetings. So that's kind of the overarching, the first goal within that goal was developing a timely list of topics for discussion, kind of working with emerging issues and trends, like Desrochers group, and kind of pulling in those topics that are of significance importance to the fire service as a whole, that have those discussions at our monthly meetings, identify and arrange presenters for those meetings that have maintained kind of a yearly schedule to drive that engagement. So like I said, that was kind of started before I took over the membership engagement group and kind of working through those things. So that's a work in progress. We've had some pretty good presentations. Student fire engineers, American Fire Sprinkler Association, obviously Chief O'Brien and his lithium ion presentation last month. The co-development update process next month. We have Chris Burnett kind of going over NASM's residential sprinkler design enhancement guideline. Again, that's going to be coming up next month, that May 18th meeting, which will be a Teams meeting. So those are some of the ones that we've had. That's our next one that's scheduled. Some future topics that we've discussed through our work group meetings. 3D printed buildings, hydrogen, fueling, and different things, pipelines, hydrogen vehicle issues, EV power stations. So not as much of the vehicles themselves and the battery storage, but then kind of the expanded power stations and installation of those and some of the requirements for that. WUI topics are going to be some future topics that you should look to see as the months roll on.
Brian, if I may interrupt just for a quick second and suggest that when we speak with Chris Burnett later this month and get him on board for this, I mean, I know he's committed already, but as he's preparing, it may be a good option to ask him to brief out on the, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, the WUI code for his office and for the state. So we may be able to tag that onto his presentation and get everything on that, which would be very timely.
Perfect. As always, it's an ongoing process. So, like I said, working with some of the other groups, emerging issues and trends. If there are other topics that the membership council or just membership in general is interested in, or potentially has had a presentation or speaker or somebody that speaks that would be worth sharing. We're always open to those suggestions, so I encourage that. As part of that, developed a list of previous presenters and topics to kind of make sure one, we're not repeating information that has already been covered, but also to go back and look at previous presenters to make sure that if there's something that's changed or updated, that maybe we re-engage them and bring them back to the front. So that was the first of our three goals. The second was expanding exposure of the Fire Service Membership Council to the fire service as a whole. So we're working to identify state and local contacts to increase the reach of our messaging, again, to drive that participation in the FSMC, and also working with the public awareness work group kind of to push out some of that messaging. Obviously, they work with emerging issues and trends and kind of develop their public awareness and messaging. So it all kind of ties together. So those go into it as well. And then our third goal is identifying opportunities to connect the Fire Service Membership Council with research organizations and other groups working on issues pertinent to the built environment. And I think you're seeing that with some of the presenters that we're bringing in for the monthly meetings and things like that. Kind of as a reminder, for those that are interested, our work group meetings are the third Tuesdays of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern. So open to anybody that would like to participate and kind of drive some of those discussions. Again, if there's suggestions or comments, or definitely encourage people to tune into those. And that's kind of what I have at this point.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone have any comments, questions, ideas? Yes, Kelly.
Just a quick question. Are we maintaining a metric of some sort to kind of track the number of people who are on our calls on a monthly basis? So we kind of have an understanding of, one, we may have a trend based on the subject, but see what it's like in attendance across the board as an increase as we provide this extra service to the fire service by making these presentations that we're getting some bang for the buck. Just as a point of measurement.
We certainly are, Kelly. I can tell you that in the, so in all the minutes that we publish, you see them, but I also keep a download from Teams, a spreadsheet, which helps to kind of automate it. So take a look at these. I make sure that I've got, just for your all's awareness too. So our group is covered here. This is last month's, right? And we've got kind of liaison staff here, but then our members and guests, and make sure that I grab as many as I possibly can and get their titles and their awards so that we can kind of see who's coming on as well. And I've got some good themes that come out of that bear out in the spreadsheet. So yeah, thanks for that. But it's just a good way that you guys can take a look at that as the minutes come out every month. You can kind of see who's joining. That's a fairly healthy list. I mean, this goes back to Andy, and I wanted to say thanks to Andy for the ideas on this too, because every time that we do a topic of interest that's timely, we've got a lot of like good response. We start to get in the 50s, the 60s, and 70s in terms of meeting numbers. So thank you again for that, and for just building
Well, and I will say also that we have found, because I keep looking, as the meeting goes on, I'll look and see how many attendees we have. And we have just maybe a few that drop off after presentations, the rest of the attendance stays. So it's really doing what we were hoping it would do and maintain that connection. And you can see by Carl's list, we have a lot of guests now. So, and they're repeat, they're not just a single attendance. So I think all of the efforts that have been done to try to increase the attendance to meetings is really working. So we just need to continue that momentum.
In the last year, we've gone 650 to 700 members now of the Fire Service Membership Council that affiliate within our membership area that Ron Keister runs, now formerly run by Carla Higgs. So that's good. And then we're tracking our numbers every month in terms of how many people are joining calls and all the rest of that, web traffic and everything.
Just a clerical point, like, probably like everybody, my calendar's so full, but when you started, Carl, sending out the appointments, and I see that helps me prioritize some of these meetings, so just since you started doing that, it's been a little bit easier to recognize.
Awesome. Thanks for the feedback.
Any other comments, questions for member engagement? Great, thank you, Brian. Next is emerging issues and trends, Michael.
Hey, good morning, everybody. The emerging issue and trends work group continues to be very busy. I'm not going to go over our goals because, in short, our major goal for 2023 was to try to get in front of some of these emerging issues and trends and to work more closely with the other work groups and supporting their particular effort. So we do have great participation in our group. We're up to 19 members pretty much actively participate in our work group, which is real good. One of the things we've done here in 2023 is we took a PowerPoint program that Kelly and I worked on and presented at a NASM conference a few years back. And we did quite a bit of modification to it. And Marshall Toomey from New Hampshire and myself made this PowerPoint program about all the work that our work group does. And we presented this 2 weeks ago in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to the Eastern State Building Officials Federation in Portsmouth. And this gave us an opportunity to provide this group of building officials with some fire chiefs present, a very high level overview of the ICC councils. We provided how the Fire Service Membership Council interacts with the other councils. We did a high level overview of all our work. And we went over our goals and trends of our emerging issues and trends work group. And we covered a number of different subjects, including inflatable spray booths, robotic storage, flammable refrigerants, vacant buildings, sleeping pods, energy storage, on-demand fueling. And we went through these topics and we made a nexus to the building officials on how they can help the fire chiefs or emergency services with these particular items. So we had a great dialogue at this presentation. Once the ICC Fire Service Membership Council website is finished, we'll be able to post this Excel spreadsheet that we have developed. I call it a smart Excel spreadsheet, but all the topics that we have dealt with since over the past 4 years will be documented on this Excel spreadsheet, and you'll be able to click on it and you'll see all the work that that has been done on these particular subjects. So that is forthcoming. We do have that Excel spreadsheet. I will give this around to all the membership here so you all can have access to it. But I like it just because all the links and supporting information that goes along with this is on that Excel spreadsheet. Some of the new topics that we'll be looking at here in the very near future is PFAS. We're also gonna be looking at, this breakthrough technology with hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen as a carbon-free fuel, sought for heating vehicles, electricity, and other industry operations. So they plan on putting this through some of the existing gas lines that we have in place now. So this is gonna be our next monthly meeting. We'll be discussing this particular item. Also storm shelters, tornado, storm shelters and that kind of stuff. We also have a couple other items we haven't really finalized yet, but it's out in the world there. It's large warehouse fires and indoor, I don't know what we call them, indoor fire pits, I guess, where you can roast your marshmallows and make s'mores inside your house now. So, that's another item that's coming. So that's pretty much just a rundown of what we've been doing here in 2023. I can share the PowerPoint program. You can modify it, whatever, if you want to present it out there. But that did provide us a great opportunity to show what our work group has been doing. And it's easy to add on to this program the way that we've got this set up. So thank you, Sean, for helping with that too. And thank you, Kelly, for helping with that. That's my report.
Great. Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, we're doing administrative meeting operations here. Making sure that we schedule breaks appropriately so people don't get up.
Any issues, questions, comments for emerging issues? A lot of stuff coming up. Yes.
One of the takeaways, being the new guy, I guess, but one of the takeaways I had from that presentation that Mike and I did was that, you know, we're being attacked in a lot of different ways legislatively if we don't keep up with some of these emerging issues and trends. I was amazed that there was a room of probably just shy of 20, I'd say, give or take. And most of them weren't familiar with the work that any of the councils did or any of the work groups did or anything. So, and some of them were new, but some of them were seasoned code officials in the area in New England. But I think if we can, another thing I think would probably be the public awareness part of it, I don't know, but just help get the word out that if we don't work to keep up and, you know, address some stuff through alternative sign opportunities and things like that, we're just gonna get mowed over. I feel like legislative, I've seen it in New Hampshire over the last 5 years. You know, we were talking about the refrigerants issue that, you know, I think there's 27 states in the country that are they're trying to push the building codes aside to move forward the A2L stuff. We had Carl and I had a conversation with that and Mike not that long ago. That was going to happen in New Hampshire, but I think if, you know, the more we can link some of that information and just to stress the importance of if we don't keep up in ourselves, I think they're going to come at it from a legislative perspective. I feel like we're going to lose. So that is
That's a good point, because what was brought up both in New Hampshire and Vermont was legislative language on the flammable refrigerants that stated no entity can promulgate rules that override this statutory language. So what they're doing is they're slowly just, that's just one topic, but they're stripping away the ability to have the fire marshal's office or whoever promulgates rules in your jurisdiction from addressing the safety issues that may come along with a particular item. So that's happening all over the country right now if you're in the promulgating rules. So the statutory body says the state or your division of fire safety, your fire marshal's office cannot hinder this initiative. You can't do anything to be in opposition of this particular item. And that hurts the fire marshal's office. It's certainly not good for code adoption. That's a good point, Sean.
Yes, Carl.
So following up on what Sean and Michael said, so the example that they're talking about is the A2L issue. And one of the things that I did was to turn to one of our subject matter experts in the code on that. Bob Davidson from Davidson Code Concepts. Many of you in the room know him. He's been a long time member of the ICC and led a number of initiatives that we worked on. He works on the NFPA side as well too. But that's one of those things that I think, to Sean's point, we've got to make sure that we promote that, because one of the good things that came out of that was when I put Bob together with them, now there's an entree to Michael sitting as the current president of NASFM. There's an entree into getting to all 50 state and, start to get into territory fire marshals and their staffs as well that way too. So working through the public awareness piece, which I know Christine's going to address later on today, and trying to strengthen that so that we can talk about a lot of the good things that we've got going, and get those kinds of conversations more broadly circulated is super important to this group.
And I think there's I was gonna say weakness, but I don't want to say that. I think something that, to Sean's point, is that we need to be a lot more aware, if we currently are in the states, of what is going through legislatively. And, some of these things that we never had that kind of language before, that just prohibited any kind of amendment or prohibition because of that legislatively. And I think we need to have a higher regard for that. And what that legislative process is, and we're talking across the country. So how do we do that? And whether it's through NASFA, IFC, or other organizations that keep a handle on proposed legislation that's coming through from a statewide perspective. I think that is where we're going to we need to try to get that fight out, I guess, early enough, so that what do we do with that, Kelly?
So based on that information, I think we do have a gap, and the gap is what is happening legislatively. Now, how we manage that as a group, we'll have to make that a discussion. But relative to what Mike said about the A2Ls, there's new legislation I just found out about on Friday afternoon that NASFM has got out of Alabama, and it's reflecting what they call latent construction items, where you cannot add anything to the codes that is not an active system in a particular building for new construction. So, for instance, pre-wiring for, and I'm stretching this a little bit, but pre-wiring for internet use in the home, or mandating photovoltaics, because that's not required in the code. But if a community were to try to make that mandatory for their community, this legislation is in place to say you can't do that. Alabama's the first state. It's gone through both the House and the Senate, and it's now sitting at the governor's desk. It's a 3-pager. It's relatively simple, but at the same time, there was no published, what's the term I'm going to call it, where they explain the bill in real language and get it out in legalese. Yeah, there was nothing else published with that. But those kinds of things that are, once it goes through one state, there's a trail, and you can follow it state to state to state, just like the A2L prohibitions and some of those issues that are going on.
Frankly, one of the ways that we've been working this A2L piece for a long time, but it was interesting in that give you an example of your point, Kelly. So Byron Matthews, who many people know from I'm trying to remember, where's he, Wyoming. So he went from state fire, he went from Metro Fire Marshal to now being the State Fire Marshal. Gets into the State Fire Marshal's office and says, "Hey, bill just went through, governor's getting ready to sign it. He's asking me for an opinion on it. You guys know anything about this issue?" Right? And it was exactly what I talked to Michael and Sean about. So, those are the kinds of things that we start to see that we can leverage this network very well to start to kind of get out there and say, "Hey, if you've not seen it yet, get ready for it because it's on its way through."
So just as one more heads up item, and when we talk about A2Ls, and PFAS. PFAS is in most of the new A2Ls. So most of the new A2Ls that are out there, they're not gonna be able to be used. And they're gonna have to go back in for to reformulate. So that whole issue is now up in the air as soon as EPA publishes its minimums for PFAS.
Well, and that's the thing, because this legislation is preemptive, right? So at the end of the day, you've now got, legislation on the books. in states that basically says, hey, if the EPA publishes a rule, we're following it, and there's nothing that state government can do about it. It's
Or industry. It's for industry. Anyway, good meeting.
Yes, Jeff.
So it's a good discussion. I don't want to lose the progress here, but I don't want to derail you either. So you had a presentation from NFSA several months back, maybe even a year or more, where we demonstrate, because NFSA is a client of mine, demonstrated a tool that we use called Fiscal Note, which essentially farms all of the state level statute bills, House or Senate bills. You can keyword search, you can do background information on the legislator proposing it, bills that they've previously worked with, their success rate, you can handicap bill essentially. NFSA is actually monitoring stuff all over the country. There's a lot of stuff going on in Texas right now, one is which very confounding, but it occurs to me that one thing that I've noticed consistently is these things pop up around the country. You find out after the fact that, oh yeah, we had that in our state, or yeah, somebody proposed that, we did this and it was successful. It strikes me that I've not seen, maybe it exists and I'm just not aware of it, a good legislative strike team nationally by the fire service to perhaps coalesce our efforts and take advantage of our personal experiences dealing with issues in the different states. I can think of a couple of things that have popped up that I thought, I wonder if anybody else has dealt with this, or man, I could use some ideas on how to deal with this. And I always, since the get-go of this organization, way back at the Joint Fire Service Review Committee, look for ways to enhance the value of what is now our FSMC offers. Maybe there's a lot of value to what was mentioned on emerging issues, but even more so potentially enhancing that with emerging legislative issues. And the possibility that maybe this organization could have something along the lines of a legislative strike team or a legislative resource group, and a way to rapidly reach out and tap into a bunch of folks who are dealing with this, because I think we're all dealing with it in our individual states. We're watching what's going on in our state, our legislature, and it all happens so fast. It's a matter of, well, depending on the state, sometimes it's a matter of a few months every couple of years. So just throwing out the idea that there's a whole lot of knowledge amongst our membership on what's going on legislatively. And to Kelly's point, he's absolutely right. These model bills go into one state being pushed by a national organization. And then they go state to state to state to state. You keep seeing essentially it's a model code development, but they're doing it in statute. And there's a whole lot of effort in a lot of legislatures of getting rid of them. I've just seen that over and over again on things where we're going to preempt them with statute because the state legislature is way better than the people who are answerable at the most local level of government. So anyway, I'm just throwing at it. It's something that has occurred to me in the past that, boy, I wished I had. That wasn't people that I could call to see whether this stuff has come up before. Maybe an FSMC legislative work group or a legislative strike team work group with a few people who are very involved with this type of stuff as a resource to the members of the membership council and potentially others, and bringing them in as members. Just an idea.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Carl?
So just follow up on what Jeff said. So we actually, we do use fiscal notes as well. And I know that Gary West is on the phone. This is actually just a quick look at the, we have kind of a fire search that's set up in here, so I can kind of pop in and see any rulemaking or bills that are coming in. And we've got probably, over 100 keywords in here. And it gives you trends, it gives outlook, percentage chance of passing, those kinds of things. So without getting too deep into the details on that, what I will say is that, we monitor that. We have federal vice president that is one of my colleagues, and he is assisted by another member of our staff as well, and they track all that stuff for us. But our main, venue for exactly what Jeff is talking about is, the ICC is a plank holder in the Congressional Fire Services Institute. And that is where we come together, looking at the federal issues, but also on occasion, we do look at the state level issues, depending on where something is happening. What I would say is that this group, I know Gary, and Gary, if you've got any comment on this, he does this for national and actually did this work for NFSA previously. Gary has joined the Congressional Fire Services Institute calls monthly. We do them with all of our government relations counterparts from each of the major national fire service organizations, including NFPA, including IAFF. I know even ULFSRI is on there, so Herbert's team is on a regular basis. And if there is someone from the FSMC that would like to step up and join those calls along with staff, to hear those presentations and be involved in some of the calls to action. More recently, we did a call to action around SAFER, which you likely probably saw, and that passed. And we've done some other things around the Nicholas and Zachary Burt CO bill that passed, trying to get CPSC funded for that. This A2L issue has come up, lithium-ion batteries obviously has come up, WUI has come up. So glad to have someone on to join on those calls and share all this information with as well. The points. We have the mechanism, and we can just we can bring somebody into that fold if that's what this group desires.
My thought was more something just came up. Do I call to find out now? And I guess your point of contact for ICC. Thought was whether the membership council could potentially take a more active role in networking.
Glad to have you help.
Monthly call, legislation is already through the process.
Well, and we do some pretty quick email circulation and quick conference calls in an ad hoc fashion to pick up on stuff that's coming through. So, if there is a particular issue that's in a state, or more importantly, it is Congressional Fire Services Institute. So we more so focus very heavily on the federal, congressional stuff. Happy to, bring folks in, but we react pretty quickly, nights and weekends. I mean, when we talk about GR doesn't sleep, I see Tim over there, and I'm sure he's going to agree. He spent many a weekend monitoring stuff, and was actually a member of the legislature for years. Yeah, we're on it. So I'm not saying it's completely covered, but we could use the help, and would love to do that.
Definitely something we need to keep on our radar. While we do that, we'll continue to have discussions to work through it. All right, anything in general for emerging issues and trends? Thank you, Michael. Next work group is public awareness. I'm going to pull something from later down on the agenda and bring it up to this item. Public awareness work group lead, Steve Swarthout. He resigned just recently from the governing committee. So we have a vacancy for the lead of the public awareness work group. And it's important that we fill that position. The public awareness is just hearing the discussions that we have now, that we need to keep the goals and the progress that public awareness work group had done previously. And we don't want it to stall. So right now there's a vacancy for the public awareness work group lead. So please consider, if you don't have to necessarily be on public awareness to be able to join and be the lead, but if you are currently participating in public awareness, I would highly recommend that you consider being the lead so that we can get, keep our goals and progress that we're doing on our activities, because we've stalled a bit. So we want to get that momentum back. So I was unable to attend the last mid-month public awareness work group meeting. So, but Tim was able to attend, so I'll let him give a report.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, due to Steve's resignation, I took the lead on it to have a monthly meeting because they hadn't had one for a while. So I appreciate everybody that did come in on that call. We had a couple new faces, which was great to see and hear. The first topic that was discussed at that meeting was, of course, Building Safety Month and all the preparation that usually goes into that. So they did work on getting the tweets. And kudos to Christine to make sure that they got out again. She does a fabulous job with those. And of course, Carl pushing them up. So we are all set to have our usual tweets for Building Safety Month. One of the other topics that was discussed, which was a topic that's been there for a while now, were the sprinkler notes. This was to give assistance to the fire marshals who were in those states that needed assistance with gaining ordinances for the sprinklers. I know that Wassom had recently put the papers out and that was mentioned in those notes. So I see that this group will be working with them to get those published, but that's going to be a continued progress that we want to see going forward. So that's going to be a major initiative for that group again. We also talked about other white papers that we were going to look forward to putting out. Of course, lithium-ion batteries is the big one, so we were referring back to the I-Chiefs and all the publications that they put out, much like what we did. The toolkits. We also, the group wanted to touch base with Beth Tubbs who can get a list from the FCAC. Any topics that they see out there that the fire service may need some more information on, just trying to prep a little bit. Like I said, as Christine mentioned, we are looking for someone to step up and take the reins on this group. I'll continue to fill the void in the middle, but we'll have our next meeting next month. It's the second Thursday in May. Any comments and questions? Anything I left out from anybody who attended?
So this may be something I think that in that, just want to ask. So several years ago, there was a FM global report. Research was done dealing with the benefits of sprinklers in residential housing to reduce carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. And it sort of showed, you know, like for a building that didn't have sprinklers, once sprinklers were put in there, you reduce the carbon emissions from a fire 33 to 97%. Fire equipment manufacturers have been have asked Jensen Hughes to take that FM global study and expand it a little bit more to help, I guess, deal with further reduction in layered fire protection. So NASFM and FEMA and FEMA Fire Equipment Manufacturers Association and other groups believe in layered fire protection, passive and active. So this study that we asked them to do, they just published at the end of March. We'd like to try to get that information out about some further reductions that can help. So the AIA, you know, done an initiative to do a reduction in carbon footprint from building construction and the life cycle of buildings. They're looking for a reduction, I think, of 65% by the year 2030, 100% by the year 2040, which is pretty aggressive. The World Green Building Council, you know, is looking for a 40% reduction by 2030 and 100% reduction in 2050. But in looking at this study that they published at the end of March, it shows that in addition to sprinklers in buildings, if you continue to have the ability for someone to utilize extinguishers by having them available, first of all, they got to be available before you can use them. But if somebody does use them in stages of fire and stuff, you get a further reduction 93.6%. So overall, with sprinklers and extinguishers, potential reduction in the carbon footprint from a fire goes to 99.6%, or excuse me, 99.4%, which is enormous. So we're trying to get that information out about this report, share that report. And so FEMA would like to ask this council, we're going to ask the Sustainability Council and the Building Leadership Service Council, as well as the International Fire Marshals Association, National, would they be willing to help publish some articles about that? And so we would help you draft it, so you don't have to worry about the heavy lift. You can edit it the way you want, but if y'all would be willing to possibly co-author something in the building safety journal to show the results and get that information out, I think it would be valuable for governments that continue to have reduction in fire protection and fire safety in buildings. It gives you a tool to fight with. It's factual information. It's based upon, again, the FN Global Report and the focus on the sprinklers, other studies of the Consumer Product Safety Council and NFPA, which brings in how they extrapolated additional fire data to come up with the number of fires that exist in the world and don't get reported, and differs that have gone a little backwards and started losing methods of extinguishment. So the data is hard to find. But, this has been a project for about a year. They finally published it, so we would be interested in seeing maybe this falls under your public awareness and be willing to publish an article for the safety journal or something. The ICC.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's really a unique perspective on how we can increase fire safety and lower, whether it's property damage or just the life safety component in homes, and tie it to an environmental perspective. So sure, we'd be certainly interested in taking a look at that report and continuing the conversations about how do we to expand that message out. So whatever we need to do to try to continue the information, that would be fine. Any comments or questions? Thank you for that.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, Russ. Is there anything that the group, well, no, I'll wait until later because we have that on the agenda for later. Okay, anything else for public awareness? All right. Next, training and education work group, Mark Wassom, the lead, was not able to attend today, but Doug Nelson graciously stepped into his shoes to give the report for the work group. So Doug.
So good. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Mark Wasson put this report together, so I'm just reporting on his behalf. I have part of the work group with him, so I've attended some of the meetings, but over the last year, the training education group has been working, putting forth proposals for the ICC annual business meeting in St. Louis. One of those that they put forth was batteries in the built environment by Chief Michael Bryan, as it continues to develop and continue to get that information out there. Also, codes that safeguard construction by Radio Rock. So those were the two courses that the work group put together or put forth for the AGM in St. Louis this fall. Another thing that I wanted to mention for the group and for the membership was the ICC is continuing to look for proposals for other learning platforms as well that include the online live and now self-paced. One of those, I know the most recent one that I'm aware of last fall was Mike O'Brien's, again, on the batteries and built environments and the ESS stuff, and heard a lot of positive feedback from that. So I think that's a good area to get more information and training onto the fire service. And a good way to do that. Did make a note here, please reach out, let him, anybody else in this organization, Carl, know if you have ideas to put on these topics. I know I've submitted a few to Carl and Mark, and they put them on the list here for us to address as we go down the road. Couple of topics that are coming down the road that you wanted to mention specifically that we're looking to dig into next year is energy storage systems. We're going together with emerging trends, which are typically attend each other's meetings to make sure we're working together. Performance-based and alternative method design review. I know Carl has a seat on a group that's working on a course for that, so hopefully we get to see some movement on that and some more training out there for that in the future.
Well, that's your seat now, as long as you want to be able to attend this. So I'm glad you took us up on the offer. No, I mean, I'm not trying to shirk that. It's, Doug showed an interest, and that's just another one of those examples where he raised his hand and said, hey, I'd love to dig into this. And I'm like, I've got something for you.
That interest was based on fire code inspections, fire code plan review. He has institute here, so I guess I'm not familiar with that. Do it. Hazardous materials, construction, fire safety, and environmental laws and fire protection systems. Upcoming trainings and note. NFSA has Expo May 3rd to the 5th in Austin, Texas. IAFC CRR Leadership Conference is May 9th through the 11th in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. CFSI is May 22nd and 23rd. IFC, Fire Rescue International, FRI, at Kansas City in August 16th to the 18th. And then the ICC AGM, let's keep that in mind as October 8th to the 11th. Just since I'm on board of NASM too, I'll mention that NASM has a conference coming up as well here in July. So please check the website there for further information. And NASM the CRR event last February too, so I'll highlight those here. Get on for getting to mention those. Next meeting is June 5th at 2 p.m. Via Teams, and same as the other workers. We're meeting monthly. I think it is the first day of the month in the afternoon. So if anybody can jump on, please join us. Well, there's no questions. Mark.
I do want to thank the work group for, I mean, that was a very lengthy report of all of the different topics and the attempts of trying to increase the opportunities for fire service to be able to attend and get great presentation and training. That's one thing that's lacking in a lot of these conferences. And so they've done a really good job in trying to get more topics in these national or division conferences. So please keep that in mind. If you see something that maybe needs a little bit more attention or opportunities for training, whether it be conferences or something that you think would be a good opportunity for a presentation to increase the training opportunities for fire service personnel, please do so. Let them know, Michael.
I would just add too, NASM does have a created training opportunity free, which is civil disturbance training. It's on our webpage. You can take that free. And for those that have taken it, we've gotten some good positive feedback on that. So it just helps from a code official perspective in emergency services, how to deal with civil disturbances, which you all know has been a daily occurrence here in the country. So I'd encourage you to go on there and take a look at it. Again, there's no cost to it.
And that's a really great point that it doesn't necessarily have to be conferences that you have to travel to. We can just have awareness of what is out there, whether it's free, virtual webinars, things like that, that can help. We can pass out or distribute information about so that we can get some increased training. So that's a great opportunity. Anything else for training and education? All right. Going to the next agenda item, reports from the officers and liaisons. So the first up is our board liaison director, Randy Metz.
Thank you, Christine. I want to start out by commending the membership council for the fire service here, for this great turnout. Probably, you know, the best turnout that we've had at one of these meetings in as long as I've been involved in the membership council, with the number of GC representatives and the number in the room here. So great job. We hope that you'll all also come to St. Louis and experience the annual conference there as well. And I look forward to being at your meeting there. Couple items that I just want to bring to everybody's attention. I know Building Safety Month was already mentioned. I really want to encourage you all to pair up with your building officials back at home and not make this just a building department deal. It's a great opportunity to highlight and share how fire and building work together to achieve safe buildings in your communities. I know that we have Fire Prevention Week, and that's where we get an opportunity to take front and center there. But, you know, back home in my own jurisdiction, we use this as an opportunity to help assist the building department in really emphasizing that they are part of the building safety process back home. And it just adds to the process when you're doing proclamations, if the fire official can be there jointly with your building official. So consider that as your local jurisdictions are pushing these proclamations through. I know they used to, are we still doing a joint proclamation from membership councils like we used to?
I have not heard of one this year. That might be a good reminder for Ron. You haven't seen one? No.
I know that membership councils used to do a joint proclamation. I haven't seen one last couple of years, so just thought I'd bring that up. I know Carl did speak a little bit with Russ Manning on call for committees. I want to encourage everybody. I know some in here have served on a co-development committee. I know I served with Ed, with Doug. I know Kelly's been on a couple. We do have the fire/WUI code committee. We get a lot of representation and a lot of applications for the fire service in those committees. It's important that we also get applications for residential code, for existing building, for IBC fire safety. There is a lot more emphasis and opportunity for the fire service to be involved in the code development process outside of the fire code. And if you haven't served on a code development committee before, you know, talk to some of these people in the room that have. You know, I got to serve with Doug and sit next to Doug, and it was Doug's first time, and he had no idea what he was getting into. He would lean over we were sequestered during COVID in Country Club Hills, and we had our little tummies, and he'd lean over and go, is this what I think I'm hearing right here? So, you know, if it's a great learning opportunity for you, you don't necessarily have to be a code expert, so don't think that, hey, I don't know enough. You will become one through this process, but it's a great way to get involved and actively participate in the code development process. We've talked a lot about WUI. A lot of states are moving the WUI process front and center. My own state, California, being one right now, where we're working towards a statewide adoption of the future of the WUI code. Right now, WUI is embedded with the Fire Code Development Committee, and we don't get a whole lot of people on the Fire Code Committee that I will say are WUI experts. So as that code continues to develop and evolve and more states start adopting and additional information is added to WUI, you know, you never know, that may become its own standalone code group in the future, because that particular industry and environment is very much unique to the fire service right now. A lot of people working in that arena that are looking to push forward good code. So I think one of the other codes that I did mention, property maintenance code, a lot of people view that as a code enforcement officer code, but there's actually a lot in property maintenance that gets tied back or can be tied back to the fire service. And some cities use it, some cities don't. You know, my state doesn't adopt the IPMC. But we are looking at that in the future there. So just look at all the different options. When you actually go in to apply, you list, this is my first choice, my second choice, my third choice. And once they fill up a committee, then they'll look at who else and where else you would like to be placed. You know, if you say, hey, it's fire or nothing, and you put that, then you may get nothing. So I think, Kelly, you've served on multiple different committees before, right?
Been on that, IBC, IFC, IBC fire.
So Kelly's made the rounds. You know, I've only served on fire code, fire and buoy. So my experience is limited, but I participated in the code development process.
The process is the same, folks.
Yeah.
And the information's just a little bit different, but all the decision making, everything else is identical. So it's a great way to broaden your own personal experience, and you can become a local expert for your own area on those particular subject areas, not just fire.
How many people in here have actually downloaded and looked at the new ICC report on building safety and security?
Thank you, Weezy does.
I know that Director Macy has, because she chaired the committee. I really want to push that out there that everybody should take an opportunity to at least download it. There's, what did you have, about 15 different chapters or sections in there. The way we broke it up into different elements of building safety and security, and participating in that ad hoc committee, I will say that the issue got a lot bigger from where we started to where we ended up. But there's a lot of good content in there. It's not a code development guide. It's an awareness guide of all the different areas where you can take and look to implement different things in your jurisdiction. And it's not just for schools. We started off thinking it was going to be for schools. The issue got a lot larger, and now it pretty much can be used for any and all types of buildings. As we know, the issues that we've seen with a lot of active shooter incidents, although schools was the initial focus, have expanded into all sorts of different types of buildings now. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. It is available for download off of our website. Great resource. Report from the board directly. So yesterday, I'm not going to steal Carl or Christina's thunder just later on here, but I will say Carl did an outstanding job of presenting an issue that we've been talking about over the last 2 months on bringing something forward to the board from the membership council. The issue was lithium-ion batteries. Carl did an outstanding presentation to the board. Great board discussion on where the issue with LI is nationally right now. And I think it was very positive. We had great board engagement, and I think that we are going to end up where the membership council wanted to be position-wise with a future board action. I'll let Carl and Christine talk about that, but I just couldn't miss the opportunity to say great presentation of Carl, to Tim and Christine that helped put together the presentation representing you all. This is why we have membership councils, to advise the board on issues that we may not have front and center right now, and to make us aware of things that we should know, because it will have future impact on the organization. And I think the fire service is doing a great job of looking for opportunities to expand their bandwidth. And it was just the first opportunity we've had in a couple of years to, as a membership council, put something on the board agenda. And great job, Carl. I'm able to answer any additional questions that you may have. We did have some discussions on future locations for board meetings. So next year or this year, we will be in St. Louis. next year, I hope you all join us in my home state of California, where we'll be at Long Beach. Reminder, that will be the second committee action hearing of the new process. So and it will be Group A, so fire and woody code will be heard there. If you're looking to participate in the first round, that will be in Orlando next year. So we're working on the travel schedule over the next 3 years on where ICC will be. But we at least know for sure where we'll be next year. And since that will be the first year for Group A, the first year for the new code development process, I hope that we have great fire service representation there. For those of you that don't know exactly where Long Beach is, it's
Right next to San
right
Pedro.
right next to where Kelly grew up and was born. But it basically is the last city in Los Angeles County before you head to Orange County, where Disneyland is. So you're about 30 minutes north of Disneyland. You're about 30 minutes south of Hollywood. Lots to do in Long Beach. We were there back in 2015, had a great turnout from ICC there. So that's it from me. Any questions for the board?
30 minutes at 2 a.m.
Yeah, well, that's at 2 o'clock in the morning there, Scott. Angie?
Just wanted to plug the call for committees and the code action development or code development committees in a little bit different light. It's encourage you all to apply, but also encourage you to poke somebody on the shoulder and have them apply. If you don't know, ICC picks up your airfare, your hotel, your meals. So if you're trying to get somebody in your jurisdiction or neighboring jurisdiction or somebody in your local chapter more involved in ICC, it's a great way to it's hard to argue with free. Your jurisdiction is covering your time and that's it. So really encourage you to tap somebody on the shoulder. I'm sure more than one of us ended up in that room because somebody tapped us on the shoulder. We're gonna Uber myself as well, but and people worry about all the commitments that they have. You're already committed to this. I'm sure you have folks at home who are committed. I call the code development committee, it's like a sprint. So it feels like a marathon when you're in it, but it's a sprint. You're given all of the code proposals just a few weeks ahead of the meeting. So it's not like you're reviewing stuff for years and you're sitting committing a ton of time. So it really is a great way to get involved, to learn all of the activity around the code, what the high issues are and how they're debated. And then you also become a really great resource back at home when you start adopting codes. Why did this happen this way? Tell me more.
Thank you very much. Anything for Randy?
Thank you all for allowing me to attend and sit back in my chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to throw it back to Angie. I was going to pass it to this. Now we go to other directors that are here in attendance. So I just want to throw it back to you. If you had anything else that you'd like to say to address the group.
I appreciate Andy plugging the report. It's a little lengthy. It is broken down into digestible sections. One of the things that came up in the ad hoc is really who is our audience? Because there could be numerous audiences. Is it building officials? Is it fire officials? Is it legislators? And there's a lot of people who are interested in this topic, and it's very, very charged, obviously. And what we came back with is what the people who really are looking for the resources are building owners and managers. So it's very much tailored to that. The publication of the report is just the first step. We didn't anticipate it just publishing a report and then having it sit on the shelf. So 2.0 of that is to do podcasts and infographics and other ways to get the information out in a digestible format that isn't reading a report. So
I just add to that, the way I found it was through facilitydirectors.net. So that publication went out to all the facility directors, which are basically everybody who is running your buildings. And that was where I caught my eye and grabbed it. So yeah, kudos to you all in that committee. It is a lengthy read, but it's a great read.
Great, anything else? Great, thank you very much. Director Stuart Tom?
Always good to call Randy Metz. He covered everything that I was gonna cover, so, again,
Thank you. All right, report from myself. I actually have things under the new business, so I won't take this time and report from Vice Chair Tim.
Just a couple items real quick, and I'll get into the other building stuff later on, but last week, Carl and I did present to the Eastern Division of I-Chiefs. A lot of good presentations there, as well as Chief O'Brien was there, and a couple others on solar EVs. A lot of good information. Could hope for a little bit more attendance, of course, but still all good. We'll be working with continuity and outreach later on to expand a few topics. One of which is going to be just a coordination of emerging issues and really trying to get information out through Matrix. We're looking at a new platform that we can maybe push out to make it a little bit easier for other jurisdictions to search. There's some new ideas of just not breaking it down through the work groups, but also topics. So that's all I got right now.
Okay, great. Next is a report from Carl.
Everyone, I'll keep it short because I'm gonna defer the report on the presentation to the board until our new business section. So just, I'm kind of standing between this group and an opportunity to stretch your legs and take probably a much needed break at this point. So just some things that are coming up here in the next couple of weeks that I wanted to make you aware of. So Tim covered, and thank you to Tim for coming out to Ocean City, Maryland. He and I, Chief O'Brien, Ray O'Brien, have been making the circuit on a number of different things. So that Eastern Division presentation was last weekend. Of course, thank you for coming this weekend. Next weekend is the National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend. I'll be serving in the incident command post for that, and then representing ICC on Sunday morning with the breakfast with the families that's sponsored by Motorola. So I'll be up on the campus Thursday afternoon through Sunday, and then coming back Sunday night and heading back off to the IASC's Community Risk Reduction Leadership Conference in Murfreesboro. I'll be briefing the FLSS board, where Andy will be on the new code development process. So Andy, I hope you're paying attention because you're going to be doing that with me now. So, but I'll be covering that for FLSS and talking about the process that Russ talked about here, just kind of reinforcing all of those messages that both he and Randy and Angie just talked about in terms of getting in code development committee applications. So that those close June 1st. So I'll be there, and then I think we're into pretty quickly. We're into Congressional Fire Services Institute week. I've been working with Chief O'Brien again and with Dr. Kerber and a few others from UL on a seminar presentation that they'll be doing on Monday of CFSI week. So we're going to coordinate that. And the ICC is also doing let me back up a little bit. USFA is doing a work group meeting that Michael and I are involved with on the USFA Administrator Summit and some of the goals around codes and standards work group and other issues that the USFA is covering down on Sunday. We'll be there ahead of CFSI to brief that out to Dr. Lori and the USFA staff and the team from NFFF. So that'll be Sunday afternoon, 2 to 5. Monday is the presentation I just told you about. The dinner is Tuesday. Wednesday is the CFSI NAC, or National Advisory Committee meeting that I'll be attending. And then we've got a Building Safety Month reception and also a new office opening reception that I know Randy and a few others will be in attendance for at our new offices in Washington, DC. So May, being Building Safety Month, is shaping up to be also on the road month as well too. So I'll be out and about in those places and happy to talk about some of the more substantive stuff, the new business items, once we get a break and get a chance to stretch.
Thank you very much. Anything for Carl? Okay. We don't have any of our liaisons, they're all in their own meetings. So let's go ahead and take a break, 10, 15 minutes, go ahead and stretch your legs, and we'll reconvene for it. There's
Yes, sir.
it's kind of soon today.
Right in the manifesto.
By the way, I was.
I did. That's all. Send your amendment to, next week.
Wishing your links to grade. That GPT or yeah, if I don't know that it's something that necessarily impacts us.
You don't have to drive, you can fly.
Oh, I believe, I was. When I checked, the drive time is 30 hours to drive. So,
Wow. I would not have thought that, but then again, I'm not as familiar with the geography where it lies, right?
They were talking.
oh, well, I was on vacation.
Oh, that's right, you told me that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That's right, you had Utah.
yeah.
I forgot, yeah. No, you were telling me you bounced in, what, Saturday, you come in for Friday?
Friday doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because they have one flight east today and one flight west. One goes to Denver or Salt Lake, it still takes. Yeah, I'm standing on the Colorado surgically, said myself, so we can get a pause, which are expensive. It's 20, 20 hours later, I'm sitting on, let them go get the clock.
Yeah, that's right. You know, it's crazy because I had similar experiences, the kid who prior to Port Line, being that they go look at stuff, you know, tornadoes and all, you know, earthquakes, hurricanes and all that. So the Kentucky tornadoes that we have through. When she there was a very complicated, I'd say. Responsibilities. You know, what do they see? You know, it's weird like, as you get older and you know, like the PTSD and this kind of work. And see the behavior results. You gotta roll down there, there's a healthy neighborhood, like very person. So, you know, it's all sometimes, when it was trying to get, you know, jumping back and forth as well, and how they work themselves on west, right? And to the racetrack, watching them go on your street, you just man,
This thing that creates the Christmas in touch, really all adjusting.
down there, and if we might, most of it, that absolutely, they're a big tornado, right? And processing, then like, get out of the airplane, and they're like, you know, what is it, blood, down, what is it, natural. So, yeah, they did the back of the PCA.
On the ICC.
Everything's quick, I agree. You know, we're all ready to go here.
That's where that's.
The same thing that came back
hurricane came up in the runway, I've had kind of easier and stuff. And it was probably 2 hours over and I told them, it's like, makes you appreciate it. So I'm just. But I'm not trying to say it, you know, it's 30 years back on, it's humans, right? So we're fire service, we have this all on. It's just, it's not as much. I'm gonna, I remember saying that if you figure it's something. I just use them. So, you know, so you know exactly what you would be giving it.
Or three hours, like you, like, sounds like you have to try to have a pretty small, still.
It's so long.
Yes, and you like.
Right, true.
Right. Some of the other sections.
Here's some of this nice things. Still, yeah, right now. So we got you.
An hour later.
Well, it's good to see you.
Yeah.
Like you. We used to be able to speak, but maybe you have to speak some things. And so that's not.
That now is all.
Correct. Correct. So based on that. I can see somebody that's. It's very vulnerable. So, and then the mechanical side,
The merging issue about that's a very resource.
well, here's the deal. Think about this. You know, so. They're gonna be burdened. Both data.
Like, there's like else.
Something.
So, already, okay.
It's going well. I used to be just running kind of a long run. Is that, Bill? Yeah, same problem you have. That like, why they have to spend so much time with. Because of that. So they break it down into separate areas.
Access got one that was on the sorry. They want to second was
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
It's trying to know slow, but you'll see.
So essentially it's,
Well, now 21 is by itself. One is understanding. Everything's. I mean, maybe you can do what it wants to do. Inputs, you got me. So we get the second draft. Second draft. Builders can. Comments, public comments.
yes, it does.
Don't read to. Yeah. Later. After that, you can make a public comment. And that's how you. Until such time as they create potential camps. That's another slide. So it's three discussions in there. So first draft is. Second draft.
So what's the thing that's gonna be quickly there?
Seawall.
I had only one child. Where did someone send that back? Okay.
Was it your proposal somehow?
That's a lot to do.
Yeah, that's. So one, every single district. One of the cities we have different narrations around. Somebody that's. Sit down. But then you have to. So some communities say, relaxing, here's a proposal. Here's the way that along with this, and we're gonna, and we write that in the community comments. And then if that person wants to address the cars, bring it back as public, there's the way look at it, second time. Do that, but they don't take the burden on themselves to do that. And then it. So the guys got some ideas.
I really think, if somebody asked, that's very expensive. Well, the last time I did.
It's on you. Inform's got to change. You just got to. And if you're on more than one technical.
The weather doesn't be these. Take care, thanks for coming, appreciate it.
Safe travel.
Yeah, but Roger gave you. Okay. But you know, there's stuff that you have read along to. Yeah, next year.
Next year.
That's 8 p.m. I didn't go there. Did you realize that there are many people that teach me exactly? They're the 20th, the 3rd, one week they got it scheduled right now. Yeah. We don't know exactly how it's going to land, but fire code will be heard. Yeah, that's the dates of 8 p.m. all the way through the clear. What they're saying. Do where. And so I still have big beach. No, it's that. Areas months for grade 1 and 2. Yeah, I'm doing B, committee hearing 1 and 2 will be 25. And both of times together. So when she had something, I was at that 3rd year. I think we like coming out of that area. To give you an idea, it's a job. The next question is how to strap on ways by. I can lift the trees and drop the trees. Great. Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Very nice. First off, I think it's not your job. He's gonna be. I asked people really nice about building and stuff. And kind of good day.
Yeah, I think you're in like 2.6%.
Yeah.
Now he's farther along.
Right. Well, he said he was gonna hopefully replace him on part of the development.
Real quiet.
Now he would only do, you know. Fire, reduction, so we'll try back. Around, they get enough goals, they just go out.
Very, very,
Just get on their skin.
very, things a lot.
So I, it's a lot of, I think so, that's all that matters. That you don't want somebody that's saying, but like, not to develop this accent and cheap. Yeah, we've got enough of those already. People go down. He should probably daddy. Daddy. Sorry, he's old, this guy is 60.
They have a time chair. I know,
Flying it up to Richard Robert, all that, why be careful, didn't you? I'm gonna have to do that. Do this, not, but it was cracked out. If you're like, a special consideration to do, because I want to know. It's not gonna be nice to the chair position. Next time you get the talk, or Samson. I went to say, for the chair position. And you don't really get what you can give it a line and say, okay, I think Sarah. Well. Sure. You don't need teachers. And you. Just keep going there. That's. Yeah. State, it used to be 185, that was, so last year. We knew every government, we knew. You don't want to be serious. Oh, I don't. And then. On these items right here. Flow as. Legs out. Just like. It's a little different.
They were just crazy.
You know, certain chapters on. That's where we're working on. I remember, they came all, and reporting on, and I last year, the types of stuff we get people on. So, I want you to share and what is. Nothing like what I do with my, you know, chat. So.
Fireworks.
Actually, my degrees from. Yeah. I did a master's in. That's when I did. Yeah.
In your career, so like, and they say no, so it's gonna, you can't get other exposure, and it pays out when it's the end. I think I'm gonna need like 3 years. Let's get the most. So. And when it most, you know, I live to each wife. No, it takes 6 months. In this, getting I got it. I was the only reason why I ran the second time. I started building a film. So for I paid fire. And they recognized. And feeling sad. Where they are. But. You know, it's a voting process going to be. Voting in your backyard. There's no big deal. I mean, you have to. So.
Consulting from another state. Every firm. So that's.
When you know where the problem is gonna be, and you decide, this is where I'm gonna make a better one. Hopefully. I was gonna, I remember the last time, yeah, see if I so like next year. That's go to. Yeah. So I have to be a Long Beach next year. I represent section 8. In the section 8. He was, I do remember that one. It's either. Time for there were enough people in the crowd to share because the reach, he was. He says that. We take that class. Check out that most important chapter they got.
That's what we do.
I kid. He came right up to high school yesterday. I don't want to. Last night.
How many inspectors? They were better.
All right, why don't we go through and start going back?
I was on my.
Great one. Yeah, he's chased the golf clock was yes.
Caffeinated now.
Yes, everyone is stretched and rejuvenated. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. I just wanted to recognize Past President Davis. Thank you very much for being here this morning. So just kind of as an aside, what we were talking about with Building Safety Month, wanted to pull up and show a short video of an agency that that actually did one as an example. Example, pretty simple.
You did a good job.
Yeah, pretty simple.
If you don't.
But effective.
If I go, somebody else is taking her.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we will move on the agenda. We have no ongoing business, so we're going to move to new business. So the first topic is, you've kind of heard it around the other topics. We've needed to highlight an issue or issues with regard to lithium ion batteries, manufacturing, transportation, storage, use in all types of occupancies, from manufacturing into warehouse storage and transportation to home use, for mobility devices, for larger home use devices. So if you just Google fires, lithium ion battery fires, you're going to get a lot of incidents that have come up of different kinds of fires, and it's really highlighted this issue that is different perspective of, one, it's still a code issue and trying to elaborate and work on enhancing the code system, but we do have some codes existing or going into 2024. But there are other issues with regard to fires that are happening across the country. And we wanted to because it's getting to be a larger and larger issue, we need to try to wrap our arms around what can we do, especially as the Fire Service Membership Council, to try to tackle this issue, to bring awareness, to get some action. So leadership talked about how can we move forward with this, and we wanted to enlighten the board members if they weren't already aware of the issue. So excuse me, so we asked for an agenda item to be included in yesterday's board meeting to highlight the issue. So unfortunately, Tim and I, with our schedules, we weren't able to attend, but Carl presented and then Randy also elaborated on the discussion. So I want to turn over to Carl, kind of how things went, what the discussion was, and I know Stuart was also part of the discussion. So I just wanted to have everyone be aware of where we're at with things and then what the future is for this issue and how we're trying to move forward. So Carl, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. So I know Director Tom had a lot to do with this as well too after the briefing, and I'll lean on he and Randy to talk a little bit about this from the board's perspective. But with Christine and Tim traveling, they would have been the ones to do this presentation, and I was, as I said to the board yesterday, humbled because we've got about, as I said, 700 members of this council. We've got roughly 18 governing committee members here as well, and then a chair and a vice chair, and I had the opportunity to represent all of the ICC's fire service interests to the board yesterday in a pretty unique way on certainly a unique issue. So this is a copy of the agenda item that the board saw. And, I just kind of keep it at the high level here, but they go through a number of different items in a day, and we were, I think, maybe the 5th or 6th group that was up. So it's an important part, but the agenda item was, lithium-ion batteries, energy storage systems, and then talking about that in the context of putting together what the Code Council deems as an ad hoc committee, which is in CPO 7, Council Policy 07 committees and members. So the idea there is that, the Code Council has a mechanism in place to be able to bring the brainpower, the energy, the knowledge, the research, industry connections, a number of different pieces to bear on a particular issue. And an ad hoc committee, as you heard before, when Director Wiese was here, safety and security had one. We've done one for disaster mitigation related activities where we worked with Director Bosa led that one, and we looked at how building officials are examining the built environment and doing the kinds of surveys and evaluations after major disasters to be able to look at the habitability of the built environment. And that informed our updates to the When Disaster Strikes presentation that we have as an 8-hour, 12-hour class. So this is going to be a pretty big deal. So what we recommended as the Fire Service Membership Council, bottom line up front, form an ad hoc committee on lithium-ion batteries and energy storage systems in accordance with standing council policy. So as you might imagine, I don't think anybody's going to be too surprised to be able to see the background on this, but it really was breaking it down, both for fire officials, but more importantly, the building code officials that were in the room to talk about some of these implications that are happening in the built environment in particular. So the big four that we hit on yesterday were battery use, storage, transportation, and recycle. And talk about in each of those kinds of phases of the lithium-ion battery life cycle, what the implications are for the built environment. So I had the opportunity to brief the board. I would be happy to share that presentation if you want to see it. I wouldn't go through it. It's probably about 20 minutes, but I can move through it since most, if not all of you, are familiar with the topic. But I guess I would stop here and ask either Randy or Stuart, even Cindy too, because I knew this was maybe a little it was new to you to a certain degree as well. Particularly since Stuart brought the motion and how we're going to kind of work through this particular issue. If you wanted to kind of talk about it from the board perspective before I got a little deeper into the.
Yeah, before you go any further, I'll just share. The board was very, very interested in this. And we'll have to see where it goes regarding the size and the makeup of this ad hoc committee, because we know that there are going to be a lot of people that are interested. One of the things that you know, it's that elephant in the room. We all know that there are problems with lithium ion, yet this stuff gets installed, fixed in place within buildings, right under the noses of people that can make a difference. And there just is not enough tools there right now to address it. And what I'm really referring to, and there are all different magnitudes of lithium ion storage, but these days we're seeing more and more of these, I'll call them small energy storage systems where people put them in their garage, in a single family dwelling. And some of us were talking, it doesn't always end up in a garage. These Tesla Powerwalls, Generac has something just like it. They're getting installed in the closets of bedrooms in houses. People ask why? Well, because that's the wall adjacent to where the service panel is to their house. So why do you want to run heavy gauge wire all the way over to another side of the house? These people say, oh, the best place to put it is on the other side of this wall. What's on the other side of this wall? Well, there's the closet. And the salesperson said, perfect place to put these things. It'll be out of sight, out of mind. You really want to put a Generac or a Tesla Powerwall in a closet. But here's what we here in this room know that battery storage, whether it's lithium ion, lead acid, you know, we've always had the requirement for operational permits once battery storage exceeds certain capacity. And in the NEC, regulatory standards on how to safely install it. But what is there in the building code and the residential code? And when I say this stuff is happening right under the noses of people who would be in the perfect place to see to it that we have safety, there are building plan checkers and building inspectors across the country that are seeing this stuff installed and they don't even think about it. Because oftentimes the fire services does not get involved in regulating construction of R3 occupancy single family dwelling. Once we get to commercial and other multifamily and so forth, we start to get a little bit more involvement and oversight to guarantee the safety of the folks there. But we're seeing a lot of it. And these days, because consumer and residential electronics gets to be so big and the need to have you know, backup and standby power in case of power shortages and so forth, it's so much easier to put in these energy storage systems than to have a generator. And, you know, it really sucks to have to change out your fuel and do stuff like that. So the use of these things is just getting ubiquitous. And in some of these bigger homes, and, you know, I come from California, I understand this is kind of ridiculous, but, you know, we see installations where it's not one power wall or two power walls. I've seen installations where there are like 8 to 12 power walls because, you know, this is like a 40,000 square foot home. And fortunately, those communities, they always drag in the fire service to take a look and they say, oh, yeah, you need to get an operational permit for this. And we have a lot of strict regulations and it goes through the fire side of the house. So I think that one of the things that the ad hoc committee is going to be able to do is bring all the groups together and say, we have some tools. Let's see to it that the tools are put in play and let's make those tools even better. And when we do that, we'll start to get our arms around it. But, you know, the energy density of these storage systems is just, it's only going to grow. And it's going to grow for a number of reasons. I'll just touch on this and then I'll turn it over to Carl because Carl's presentation was a slam dunk. It was really good. But a lot of what's driving the need to have even denser and denser energy storage is the transportation sector. And everybody says that EVs aren't really going to take off until they can get 1,000-mile range, and that's probably true. But when they invent a battery that can, drive a car for 1,000 miles, think about what the energy storage systems are for commercial, industrial, and residential applications. It's kind of crazy. And then the other thing is, where do you think all those batteries in EVs go when the mileage range goes down because the battery has degraded? They reharvest those, they repurpose them, and a lot of them end up in these other battery packs from what I will refer to as the second tier energy storage systems, not the Generacs, not the Teslas, but these others. Any cheap batteries they can use, the better. I don't know about you guys. I don't feel that comfortable with that sort of thing in my jurisdiction. But if you think that this problem's going to go away, it's not going to go away. So I think the ad hoc committee is going to be a great thing. Yeah, the board unanimously thought that the ad hoc committee.
So the mission statement for the ad hoc committee is to make recommendations, or similar to the tall wood building ad hoc committee, actually make code changes on the subject itself. Because we have the FCAC, who has the energy group right now, who's talking about all these things, maybe not to quite the magnitude that you're expressing, but that work is ongoing as we speak from a code perspective. In the part of, not to mention the work that MPA has been done on 835.
Kelly, you must have been in the room because this issue is so big that the motion, the reason that Carl turned it over to me was we were trying to figure out where to go. And so what we did was we determined that we need to define what the scope and charge of the ad hoc committee will be. Because the other thing is this, in order to really gain a real firm foothold is the scope and charge of this committee needs to be something that everybody wants. It could grow so big. Yeah, and it's one committee enough because there are all these side things that people say, scope creep. The energy storage system has all these side things. What about the disposal? One of the directors asked, and it was talking about hazardous sludge from the recycling of all these things. Do we want the ad hoc committee to start talking about environmental? He referred to it as end of life process, and we said, whoa. Which is why, Kelly, what we determined was we need to define what the charge and the scope will be. And as past President Davis just said, it may end up being more than one ad hoc committee. We don't know yet. But the good news is, thanks to this membership council and Carl in particular moving it forward, this got some attention, and we're going to do something.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Stuart pretty much nailed it. There was passion in the room. People understood the issue at hand. And I think that's one of the biggest things that conversations, myself, Carl, Christine, Chief O'Brien, this is an opportunity to bring awareness to an issue that the fire service knows and has experienced. And I think that's the important part, is to bring the building officials in, to bring electrical inspectors in, to bring all of the other areas into the building process, to sit down at the table with the experts that have already done some study. So right now I see a lot of silos going on where IAFC is doing something, NFPA is doing something, NASPM is doing something. And we need to get all of those people in the room along with the manufacturers. If we're looking at EV type stuff, the big three coming out of Michigan that are doing all sorts of stuff in the EV market right now. So that
on the issue you came up, long-term, or the tall wood was designed as an ad hoc committee specifically to bring forward code change proposals.
Right.
The building safety and security ad hoc committee was designed to bring forward an awareness guideline. There was no code change proposals in that, guideline that was put forward there. I see this as being somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
That you may have information that comes out of this that leads toward development of additional standards. Remember, we have standards that are coming out in 2024 that we haven't even seen implemented yet at the local level to see, have we, where are the holes? We have already identified holes that FCAC is working on for the next code cycle based on what we have learned in the last 2 to 3 years. This is going to be an evolution process. And I think this is definitely going to be the entry point for ICC into the arena to get all those people at the same table and bring forward awareness, could bring forward featured code change proposal, could bring forward, additional technology that's coming down the pipe and try to get out ahead of where we've always been behind right now.
I would have just one more thing I'll add to that I'm aware of, and I've been doing some research on this independent of you guys. Even independent of maybe you all from that perspective. And what I was looking for, is there a singular national voice about lithium fire safety? There is.
Right now, there isn't. There are many voices.
There's many voices and they're all stovepiped. Okay, and they're all taking their own personal view of what they think the problem is from all these different subjects. But there's no one place where it's coalesced into one location. And if that's what you guys are doing to the ad hoc committee, I commend you for that. Because that's the failure that in the system right now, is that there is not that one voice.
Well, it's been an interesting issue to track, but I think Cindy's got some comments that she'd like to share too.
So I think one thing that Randy put on that is going to be important for this committee is keeping ahead of the technology. And hopefully lithium goes away because it's scarce, it's dangerous, and there's so much technology coming down the pipe from solid state to sodium ion.
Right.
And we need to stay ahead of it because waiting 5, 6, 9 years for something to get in the code, when it's changing so rapidly, we have to figure out a different way.
It could be a self-correcting form.
Yeah.
With technology changes, with the fire part, it gets drops away because it's no longer a hazard. And we just have the energy density, which is the golden goose for the whole battery issue. I don't know if we'll ever get there. I agree that, taking that broad look with the idea that technology is going to take us past the hazard. Ultimately, we only have this point in time where this product is being used, and after that, it generates into a whole different issue that we no longer need the ad hoc. But just on the short view, we got the problem now. Let's deal with it.
So I could speak, it's good to be here in the room with, multiple members, NAS from IAFC, having our NFPA counterparts here in person and on the phone too, because I can tell you from where I sit as staff and working with our National Fire Service organizations, I think all of us have been, we've all had initial efforts in this, right? There's Chapter 12 of the IFC, we've got some resources that I'll show you that go beyond that. The 2024 pieces that are coming in to address micromobility, are in sync with where 855 is. But this calls into question everything to do with codes and standards world right now, because it's not just about ICC and our codes in terms of the built environment. All of the standards that underpin our codes are in question at this point because we don't know the answers to how would an NFPA 13, system, whether that be a full 13 and R and D, handle micromobility, right? And that's just starting to be looked at by our partners in NFSA, along with NFPA, and I know FSRI folks are doing that. That experiment happened a couple of weeks ago, so it's not out yet. But it calls into question, like 72 was just updated, very lengthy process, right? 72, do we know what smoke alarm technology, how it's going to perform when we're looking at what the products of combustion are from thermal runaway, right? What implications are there? Do we have the warning time, right? So carbon monoxide, that piece falls under there too. So literally everything that underpins the codes right now in terms of standards and all that, we're all struggling, I think, to figure out what's appropriate for our lane because we can get out of scope really quickly. So I think why, to your point, yes, that conversation needs to be coalesced. But we have been not trying to necessarily be in stovepipes as much as we've been trying to figure out what the problem is and what our appropriate initial lanes are to be in, because the problem is so much bigger than all of us. It's one of those big issues now, just like, sprinklers, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, and WUI, lithium ions up there in the top 5 right now. And where do we go with it? So, that's the part that I think we're all trying to struggle with and bring some definition to. Robbie and Bob have been involved in this. I know we, presented with Ray Diehl, as part of the group that we brought this issue to at NASM's annual conference last year. So, we're finding our way, right? But, I can kind of jump into what like I said, I'm not going to do this full presentation, but I'll hit the highlights of what we spoke to the board about just to show how the kind of the fire service pieces were represented in there. So, really what we were coming from on this to get started with, and thank you to Christine and to Tim for starting this base document that ended up being the agenda item and then proved to be the basis for this presentation. Use, storage, transportation, recycle, right? And we wanted to get the information in front of building officials and say, you know what, this affects the built environment. It's not just what the media is focusing on today in terms of it being EV problem or being a micromobility problem or some of the things that we're seeing come up that are headlines. It's much larger than that when you start looking at the implications for the built environment and why building code and fire officials are starting to ask questions about this, and we don't have answers for them yet. And as an organization, whether it's us, whether it's our national partners, you know what, we have to come up with those answers and start to put pieces on the street that are going to become the tools and resources that they use to look at this problem. So we've just begun to address this, as all of you know, the pieces on ESS and the micromobility stuff on lithium ion. If you're not on the 2018 I-codes, particularly the IFC, you don't get any benefits from that right now. 855, when was the initial publication on that project? 27. Yeah, so, we're right in the same neighborhood, right? So, we just started to address this and we've got to go a long way in our cycles. To Cindy's point, with 3-year cycles and, trying to even just keep up with the technology, let alone stay even, or to her point of trying to get out in front of it. I mean, it's a massive issue. So, we tried to highlight 2 big significant concerns around this lithium ion piece: thermal runaway and deflagration. Those are 2 terms that I really wanted to make sure that the board knew and kind of understood, and then saw some examples. So what we did was, and thanks to the UL folks, I talked to Steve and Sean about this too. Super high level. I didn't want to get into weeds with the board about kind of like how fire service response and hazmat response works, other than keep it at the 100,000 foot level. So, and we dove into this. This was the near miss report that Sean McCrane and Steve Kerber were the principal authors on. I think there was one more on that, but it wasn't. Angie brought up yesterday that it was not a NIOSH or OSHA report because of the fact that we did not have line of death associated with this. So that was what the background was to get to this report, and how good the folks in Surprise, Arizona were about participating in this from the fire service to share these lessons learned. We talked about this incident just as a quick refresher. It's a 2 megawatt system, 27 racks, 1 rack failed, which is rack 15, which you see in here. There are 14 modules in there, 28 NMC cells. So that chemistry is the most unstable, but yet the easiest to produce. So it's the most pervasive in the market right now. 10,500 some odd individual cells in that building alone, right? And just kind of gave the building layout, showed the 2 doors, talked about the bottom right, essentially what would be kind of side A to this, as we're kind of looking at it, was the door that the fire service used. So then we kind of refreshed on, okay, this is what the fire service showed up and was looking at, right? And I said, this is not a morning situation. This is in the afternoon, evening time frame, and that's not fog on the ground. That's, carbon monoxide with hydrogen cyanide. And that is a common, when we start to see some of these other examples I'll show, those are your 2, pieces that are regularly off gassing, but when you start into a thermal runaway event, there's one of your first indicators. So the ESS did what it was supposed to do. There was a smoke alarm activation that happened that, opened all the breakers and contacts. A fire suppression system, which was a clean agent system discharge, did a pretty decent job, as you'll see, if you remember the report, did a decent job of controlling the fire, but the fire department upgraded the incident to a hazmat incident, and, you know, the part that was missing for the board that Angie laid in a little bit during our conversation was just that time lapse of how long the fire department came in and did its assessments. And they were, you know, to the credit of the first arriving units, they upgraded the incident. To the credit of the hazmat team, they did 3 different sessions of air monitoring on this incident. And then when they decided to actually do their entry, it was full. They stretched the hose line, had already, you know, monitored the scene. So, you know, kudos to them. But they were looking, to their credit, hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, they were looking for this, right? So following multiple assessments, the team made entry. They encountered even more of that gas, the vapors of the gas flowing out the door that they opened. 3 minutes later, transmitted a mayday, and the thermal runaway happened. Nothing was an incident that caused by the thermal runaway, and it was basically that oxygen was introduced back into this environment. You know, one of the things that, you know, maybe they didn't do as much, but is kind of this modern fire service takeaway as this has evolved over the last few years, is that real aggressive ventilation that we do on these kinds of places now, and start that early and try to do it with an intrinsically safe unit to be able to do that rather than a gas powered or standard gas power, or standard electric powered ventilation fan that we use for fire. So anyway, that happened. I pointed out here, and this is one of those key pieces that I think really captured the board's interest, which was, you know, having 4 members that were in here entering through the store. You had 2 members that started out here, 2 members that kind of started out here, and you see where they ended up in red. So the blue is their initial position. You had a firefighter and a second firefighter basically on the right side of the door that kind of ended up over here from where they were. But the most notable piece of this is that the engineer, the driver of the vehicle, and then this is probably about 40 to 50 feet. This is about 70 feet here. And they, as they were blown away from that door, lost all kinds of gear, had SCBA stripped off of their back. I mean, it was just like a, you know, essentially a yard sale of fire service PPE that had come out and were blown under that fence. And then I got into the summary of, I think this was probably one of the more impactful slides. This summary is included in the after action report. And I did not read this because I don't think there's a purpose to over stress this. But as you take a couple seconds and you start to look at particularly what the captain and that fire engineer as a driver, the apparatus suffered in terms of injuries, and they were both flown out. They're both recovered and back on the job now. There's been follow-up interviews with them. But I mean, that's a pretty impressive set of injuries to, you know, that were survivable. And show you what, you know, this is, the idea was commercial installation versus I'll go into kind of this residential use piece that happened. So this kind of set the stage for like, wow, you know, like who knew this kind of energy existed, particularly when I made the point that the building's up to code, you know, and it's built to current code. Clean Agent kind of did its job, and then the fire service did its job all the way through and opened the door to investigate. And after 3 minutes, we introduced, you know, unknowingly enough, you know, clean air and oxygen back in that environment that, you know, that thermal runaway ends up happening again and turns into a massive deflagration incident that almost killed 4 people. Right, so that's
when this incident occurred, knowledge of these types of facilities was still really in its infancy. They're going in everywhere now. You will see stored energy systems like this with massive amounts on some vacant parcel in your city. And I've got one that just came into my city in the middle of Carlsbad. And you're gonna start seeing them more and more, not just out in remote rural places. They put one down in Otay Mesa that was like 10 times the size of this one right here, right on the United States border. And based on this incident, they said, we're gonna run, you know, fire service and building officials down and actually do tours of our facility to make you aware of what's here. We had no idea that was even being planned and built at that point there. So this one incident has brought a lot of awareness to this type of ESS environment that is important for code officials everywhere.
So one of the things to add to this too is, and this especially happened in 855 and technical committee, is the utility company pushback. Because oftentimes when utility companies are putting the systems in, fire service has no idea. They're not required to come to you and do plan review. They have none. And so when 855, included utility systems as part of the review process for these types of systems, they pushed back hard. And am I not right about that, Roy? With 855?
They were exempted.
They were exempted. Exactly right. Then Surprise Arizona happened and their argument fell flat on the face. And it prevailed that within 855, they do have, fire service has authority to be part of that review service. But that was a big fight in itself.
So we'll take this forward here and talk about what, transition out of the commercial environment, and several years ago now, right? So this was kind of the first piece that was addressed in the codes. Energy storage was the first piece that was addressed in chapter 12 of the ICC. 855, struggled with this, and now you start to evolve into this stuff that's smaller. So now we've gone from these big installations, and they're going to get even bigger, right? But we're kind of necking down and getting down into micro mobility. So again, UL FSRI, this is for those of you who haven't seen this yet, micro mobility scooter, tested in this building, in charging in a bedroom, right, which is fairly commonplace. Thermal camera, let's take a look at, keep your eyes on what we're talking about in terms of temperature. Intentional overcharge for about an hour and 40 minutes. You start to see the off gas happen, and then it goes into runway, and then there's full deflagration. Watch this number, watch this window, right? You're gonna go to about 1200, 1150, 1200 degrees, just like that. That's not survivable, right? 1150 degrees, we're gonna come back down to about 500. And then we're gonna get that room as it gets the full flash over up to about 1300 degrees heat, and then it'll kind of even out at about 1100. That window that you see in the bottom left, that was a 4 PSI measured overpressure in that room. So windows closed, simulating fall, winter kind of scenario. The windows in the front, you're looking at kind of the, I believe the back of this, but the front and the back show the same characteristics. Both windows blew right out, frames pushed out. And that, 4 PSI is not, I mean, you can kind of hold your hand on that if you're just holding a regular air hose, but you talk about 4 PSI and that volume in that environment, all happening at once. It's pretty convincing, right? So that's something that I think that, I kind of rewound that and showed it one other time, and it might be worthy of doing that here just for a quick second. Just so that you can kind of, now that you've seen this, watch for the initial reactions start to happen from the hour and 43 minutes of overcharge. You'll see the battery start to off gas, then off gas very severely. It goes into runaway. Then the deflagration is most noticeable here again, the infrared. I know I was focusing here on temperature, but you can watch the deflagration of that battery as it essentially just kind of consumes itself. And as the aluminum pieces just kind of flying out of it, the scooter survived pretty well, but the battery was the piece that really was big part. So you start to see the deflagration start to happen here, where you see those pieces kind of ringing down, right?
And Carl, I think a really notable item is I've been watching the clock, and from the first moment of off gassing, showing that there's any indication to deflagration was like 20 seconds. So if somebody is sleeping in there and they're charging it
You're done.
overnight, there's no way, forget the complexity of the chemicals in the off gas. You got 20 seconds.
That's not survival.
It's just, that's,
Right. So, take that from the research and analysis environment, right? And then start talking about like what's happening in the street. So only a few weeks ago, this is kind of the latest piece that happened. It's an e-bike fire that happened in Astoria, Queens. The FDNY addressed this. They're unfortunately getting pretty good at going into these incidents. What you're going to see in here is a fire that happened in the middle of the road, standard construction, 2-story construction in Queens. Some of the takeaways from this that you'll see in the video up front that I'll summarize at the end are fire service got there in 3 minutes from the time that they received the call. I mean, that's like unheard of, right? So, they got there, they're well staffed out and, got there to address the issue. Still resulted in, there were 5 people in the fire building, 2 perished. This ended up being a scooter that had a non-OEM rated charger to it. There was an extension cord down in the vestibule of the residence. It had been charging out there, but it wasn't actively charging at that time. In fact, it was disconnected from the charger. So this was purely a damaged set of cells that turned into a thermal runaway piece. It's not been released by the FDNY yet, but that information has been shared quietly amongst kind of a small group of us that kind of, get the advance notice about the stuff, thanks to Dr. Kerber and his team. So this was April 10th in Queens. One of the things you're going to notice in here too, that's fire service related that I did not talk to the board about was you'll see Hazmat 1 from the FDNY overpacking this. So they've already gotten to a point where they've started, we've got drums and then the overpacking material that you heard Chief O'Brien talk about and packaging that lithium ion battery and all the components up for transportation so that that is removed from the residence and now it's hazmat and it's transferred over to a disposal company. That's a piece that I did not get into with the board that you may be interested in. The extra credit piece of this is on top of the building. What do you see up there? Solar PV, right? So in the end, like, what's that telling you about the building? Not only does it have a scooter in it, but it's likely got energy storage. It's definitely got, not only a meter socket, but it's also got all of the inverter that's needed, and it's likely got energy storage, some type of batteries in there to be able to take in that for the nighttime use, unless it's being transferred directly back to the grid. So you know that on that, likely, where's the meter socket for this place? Side what? Probably side C, right? It's gonna probably be side C. Panel's gonna be in the basement. Where's all that, where's the transfer switch and all that stuff? Is it inside? Is it outside? We don't know today, right? I mean, that's not standardized yet. So not only do you have this e-bike piece to deal with, but you've got solar to deal with. Stuart.
You know what, your point there, Carl, is the point that I was making when I said, we're seeing people put energy storage systems in resident closets because it's a function of where your service panel is. And if the garage is way over here and the service to the house is here, these companies, they're just saying, oh, we got the perfect place to put it, out of sight, out of mind. We'll just put it in your closet in the bedroom. I don't know the size of the Generac. I think Generac standard unit is 10 kilowatt hours. I know that a Tesla Powerwall is 13 kilowatt hours. That is so much larger than an e-bike or a scooter battery. And if a scooter battery can do that in Christine, what did you say, 23 seconds?
About 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Think about what happens when a full-blown ESS in somebody's closet goes bad.
And the reason why they're being driven in there too, I'll tell you, I mean, you guys think about this, many of you got big cities that you deal with though too. When you look at this environment, sure, this is Queens, this is a residential area, New York City, it's not Manhattan, it's not Brooklyn, it's not the Bronx, but Queens, and you see residential like this all over the place and also single family homes. What's gonna happen to those ESFs that they mount them on the outside? They're weather resistant, everything's good about their performance and everything else, but what's gonna happen in the city once you start to hang those outside? Anybody? I know Robert's got the answer.
Graffiti.
Yeah. I mean, that's worth some money, right? If you're gonna wake up one morning and then there's gonna be some wires hanging on the wall and your battery pack's gonna be on it, right? Your transfer switch is gonna be gone, your shut off's gonna be gone, right? So a lot of this stuff, particularly, we heard a lot about this, Tim and I did last weekend. It was, solar PV, you're gonna see a lot of the big city stuff be, kind of jammed into basement, sub-basement kinds of areas and so forth too, and only have the emergency shut off stuff on the outside, if we're lucky, as the fire service. So it's something to keep in mind. You don't want to hang all that technology out there. It's gonna walk.
So chapter 12 does prohibit the installation in bedrooms in interior, but it's in the fire code.
Yes.
That's the problem, is unless they come to the fire official and say, do you want to be part of the review process? And your local jurisdiction is actually applying chapter 12 out of the fire code to the review process. The building official is probably going to say, wherever you want to put it, here's your permit. The salesman is going to put it wherever the occupant wants it and wherever it's easier for them to do the install, regardless of what the fire code says. And that's what we're seeing in California, as these are now rushing to get applications in right now. There is no consistency And the companies aren't coming and saying, hey, we know that chapter 12 says I can't do this until a fire official tells them you can't do this. It's just like any other thing that we see. Fire needs to insert themselves into the process, especially when it comes to residential, single family stuff where we're seeing now, because now where's that coming? That's coming out of the residential code. Well, does the fire code apply to the residential code? Sure. If you make it apply to your residential review process. But if you're saying, hey, a single family home, we don't have anything to do with that, and your agreement with your local building official is the fire department doesn't review single family homes, you're losing out on a process that you need to be inserting yourself into now.
So remember the context of the FSRI video that you watched with the scooter in the bedroom, and then we'll apply this while it's not the bedroom, it's the vestibule of this building.
That fire is part of a growing and tragic trend. Flames started by a lithium-ion battery, and this one ending with 2 siblings killed.
Tonight, we are getting a closer look at what sparked the fire. The FDNY releasing these images of the charred battery and the e-bike blackened and in pieces. CBS 2's Tim McNicholas reports flames went up so quickly, neighbors had to help rescue people jumping out of windows.
A daunting cleanup effort is underway on 46th Street near 28th Avenue, hours after smoke billowed over the neighborhood, and people who live in this home cried out for help.
When I heard someone screaming, my house, help, help.
Theodore Alifajanis says he and 2 other neighbors helped a few people escape through a window.
We caught them as they jumped out the house. You got to help people in need. That's it. I didn't even think.
Firefighters say a total of 6 people were in the home, a father and 5 other family members, including the 2 siblings who died. And the FDNY says the e-bike that sparked the fire was near the front door. The family couldn't escape through that door due to the explosive nature of e-bike fires.
If this was not a e-bike fire, most likely we would have been able to put this fire out without incident.
E-bike batteries have now caused 59 fires in New York City this year, killing 5 people. The batteries caused 220 fires all of last year, killing 6.
All right, so that was the video, right? And you start talking about how fast that happened and the fire department getting there in 3 minutes. I mean, you see the overpack that was happening. I mean, Hazmat 1 is running they get dispatched to every call and any of the 5 boroughs to be able to handle a mobility device, and they overpack it and then set it up so that it could be hauled away. But the numbers that I gave to the board, beyond what you kind of see here, that's still dimmed out, right? 2020 numbers for these fires in New York City alone. And New York City is a great indicator because you know what? It's going to happen there first because you're seeing the commerce and the volume there first, and it's going to end up coming to your neighborhood if it's not there already. 2020, we saw 44 fires, 23 injuries, 0 deaths. 2021, 109 fires, 79 injuries, 4 deaths. Fast forward to 22, and then, I don't have injury numbers, but I've got 220 fires that you saw here, 6 fire-related deaths from lithium ion. 2023, right now, we're at 59 and 5 deaths, right? So, I mean, you just see how that's growing exponentially. It's not leveled out. I mean, it's continuing to grow. And it was interesting because I'll kind of call out one of Michael's members a little bit too. I invited one of Michael's members, who's a state fire marshal, to join this panel that we were doing kind of jointly with a few state fire marshals, NFPA, ourselves, and the IAFC. And I said, hey, you know what? I know you've got this problem in your state. You want to join the panel and talk about it? He said, we don't have this problem in our state yet. I'm not even beginning to address it. Fast forward a year, less than a year later, that same state fire marshal now has a full direct reporting system set up specifically just for lithium ion battery fires and is struggling with ways to be able to quantify the problem in the state. But didn't have a problem this time last year when we were putting the presentation together. So not trying to, I'm saying normal reaction, right? You might not be seeing that if you're a state fire marshal or chief, that information might not be getting to you yet, but guess what? It's coming. And that's a perfect example of how that works, right? So here's the summary on that fire, right? Lost the life of 2 siblings, with a 7-year-old boy and a 19-year-old girl. I noticed that was kind of a big separation. So a little question kind of around that. But, boy and a girl died, 5 family members, plus the father were in the home, 4 occupants out the windows. You heard, I stressed that 3-minute piece of the response time. the e-bike was near the front door and it was an aftermarket charger. So one of the things that we're seeing is, more and more that, we see like the 2548 and other pieces coming from UL. If you're using the OEM related, stuff, fresh batteries and using the right manufacturer and all that, the right charging systems, it's not nearly as prevalent as you're seeing the non-OEM stuff, the cheaper, versions. And we've been dealing on this on the fire sprinkler issue for years with, fake pendants and all the rest of that. So, that was notable. This piece, again, New York City, what do you guys see up in here? Do you see any of these slides and what they say on them in terms of the red bags?
Look at delivery.
Right, what's that telling you? Ready for this? I posted this on my LinkedIn a few weeks ago. 34-story residential high-rise in Manhattan. Okay? This is an illegal business use in that basement in the 34-story residential building where they're taking all of the delivery folks who have the e-bikes, scooters, right? They're coming back in at night, storing their bags on top. You can see shoes, you can see a helmet in the next picture. The scooters are in there, and then they're taking the batteries and charging them in these kind of roll-away wooden boxes with passwords, right? Pete Matthews is a friend of mine. Do anybody know Pete from Firehouse Magazine? He's the editor of Firehouse Magazine. I've known him for a long time. I post this on my LinkedIn, and he calls me up and says that's every firehouse in America today, right? And what I mean by that is flashlights, portable radios. Now we've got everything from that to extrication gear that's being electrically charged on the rigs and in the firehouse. So to a certain degree, we're guilty of this too. But talk about the occupancy. Is this the right use of that occupancy? Is it protected? And you start to look at things like this. Right, so the conduit, that makes a really great place to hang your helmet, right? We're maxing out, like the gang box, the plugging strip is fully maxed out, multiple extension cords, and there's plugging strips, unplugging strips, right? And there's the batteries here, so I don't even need to get into this with you guys. I mean, but this is coming, and we're seeing people so the scooter companies will move into a location and they've got to find a place to be able to charge these bikes. So you're looking at commercial inventory post-COVID is pretty wide open in a lot of cities. I noticed a lot of it here in Tampa while we were driving to dinner last night. Signs up, space available. So they're taking that. They're even taking residential stuff too. You're gonna find apartment buildings where you got 2 and 3 apartments where, it's just like the old hot dog carts. I don't mean to be kind of throwing Bill Bryan under the bus here, but you remember how you put a hot dog cart on the street and about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, the car will come around, throw the hitch on the back and tow away the cart. Like, where does that thing disappear? It's with the propane and all the other stuff in it. Well, this is that same problem in modern times where you're taking the e-bikes now, they're collecting the e-bikes, they're gonna take them and toss them in a couple of apartments, run a whole bunch of, non-rated stuff in there, and charge these e-bikes overnight, come back in the morning and put them right back out on the street corner in front of the residential building. So, yeah, I mean, that's that kind of stuff. This is 211 batteries in that building alone. They found chargers. This is a commercial bus in Paris, France. Yep. The batteries are on top. You can see they just wanted to run away. Take a look at how long it takes to get to complete demonstration of this bus. Okay. So what's really awesome about this is this could be your fire apparatus in your administrative vehicles. This could be your track trucks, your school buses, your city buses, you name it, right? As I mentioned in this video yesterday, one of the interesting facts that California Resources Board will have is still being produced by EPA. They're going to stop selling commercial diesel trucks by 2036. They're going to ban the sale. Okay, so in the end, this technology is going to come. Okay, so it'll be on that timeline. But there are places like California and others where it's on. So the wind's blowing away from it. Can you imagine if the wind was blowing in on this building and we lost one window? Now we don't must pick up the bomb, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that yesterday with the board and explain that. Again, that was pretty eye-opening. They're realizing that all of their city fleets and county and town fleets are going to start this.
I believe the U.S. here too.
Yeah.
I mean, Paris, I understand that.
Connecticut didn't happen,
They're finding designated parking spaces away from everything else, and they're putting down the parking lot at the end of the day. Just to keep the hazard away from other resources.
not only that, but so Macon-Bibb County just bought a fleet of school buses, electric. And they just realized that they have to go back and evaluate the load they're putting on their bridges because of the weight.
We've had New York City Department of Buildings contact the ICC in the last week because of all the flack that they're under. People, it's not necessarily true, but they're getting the question, which is how do EVs contribute to weight and that potentially contribute to the collapse that they had in their parking garage a week or two ago now. So, you know, that it's an active question that's out there, and that's where I start to outline these questions for the board. Is it, you know, we don't necessarily have the answers. We need the research pieces. We need to bring together the smart folks from the manufacturing industry, recycling industry, the code business, particularly our building code officials, marry them up with the fire officials and start to answer this stuff. So, you know, it's evolving rapidly. We reminded them, hey, we only started to bring this in 2018, and the codes as an organization. Charging occurring in occupancy is not designed for what's happening in them, right? So not necessarily even just residences, but we've got, you know, Randy's got a great example. Let him talk about from Carlsbad. I mean, what did you just have to do in terms of the e-bikes? People bringing the bikes to work?
Oh, yeah, so, you know, when we had tried to get our city manager to give us some time with our social media communications group to start publicizing that this was an issue that we needed to educate the community on it. He said, where's your data? And I had all sorts of data, but it wasn't in Carlsbad. So I didn't get my time with communications. We had our first Lithium Ion fire back in March. We had our second a week later. A week after that, I had all the social media time that I wanted. And when I said, by the way, you know, we have city employees that are riding their e-bikes to work that are charging them in their offices, in their cubicles. And he said, we have what? And I said, I guess you haven't walked through city buildings much lately. And within 48 hours, I was directed to write a policy for him to put out for all city buildings saying, we're not going to charge any personal mobility devices, A, on the city's grid, but B, in our habitable spaces where we're working. Because we had people that literally, they would ride it and maybe they wouldn't go home and that bike would sit there and charge overnight in City Hall. We even had issues where we have our own bike medics and bike patrols for our PD, and how are they charging their e-bikes in city buildings and stuff. We have to take a look at that and make sure that we're not putting ourselves at risk and in jeopardy based on what we're now seeing here. So I think that this has a lot to still be evaluated. We happen to be one of those progressive cities that once I've got somebody to listen to me and see that it actually did occur, now they're all in. I'm sure that other cities, it would be a lot more difficult. We probably would have cities that say, and this is the hard part. My particular city of Beach City in San Diego County, we are very environmentally conscious. We don't want to come off as trying to stymie the sustainability process. Okay, and that's the first thing I got was, you know, you guys are against sustainable, and I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. We're trying to educate you on how to do this safely and still promote sustainability for use of these as part of our climate action plan in our own city. So fire service can't come out and be against the use of these. We have to come out and say, we're looking for opportunities to provide safe use and operation of them, or we're going against other elements here at ICC that we're trying to promote. And, you know, this is kind of normal whenever something new is brought in that has, you know, adverse reactions that we didn't really think about, but it sounded great when we first rolled it off. So that's what we dealt with the last month.
So you can see the questions here, right? The questions, you know, that we posed to the board, just hanging questions, right? You know, where they being manufactured and stored, what's the transportation and recycle look like? That goes back to the kind of the first slide that I showed you, right? What are the structural fire risks to do with EVs and lithium-ion batteries? And talk about the examples of just how our parking deck's going to be transformed now. What are the implications for the NEC in terms of being able to put in automatic shunts or shutoffs So that we don't have 24-volt electricity and NFPA 13 rated sprinkler systems competing with each other as our members are trying to extinguish fires, right? So, this is an everybody issue, right? How much water is needed to control lithium-ion battery fire? And I talked about 500 gallons to 650 gallons on a standard Class A pumper. I know you guys are Brighton. What are you guys doing? 1,000 gallons on an engine or something that you guys understand?
About 950.
Oh, yeah, I heard Mike say that. Yeah, that was blown away. I mean, I'm sure it's just because of interstate exposure that you guys have got.
The biggest reason for that volume of water is we are 40% municipal water.
Got it.
So we got to bring a lot of water to start.
Yeah. So you're kind of ahead of the curve, right? So 500 to 1,000, let's say, if you're in, jurisdiction like Brighton area. But generally speaking, 500, 650. But we're looking at upwards of 20,000 gallons or more to be able to cool one of those fires, and maybe you're not even guaranteed to be able to put it out, depending on the chemistry and how it's going to react once it's cooled, or what the damage is to the cells. There's so many different pieces that are complex, and I think what the board struggled with yesterday, and I didn't want to get into, we all kind of understand the idea between kind of standard, combustibility versus exothermic chemical reaction, right? And kind of how those pieces work. And I didn't want to bring the board down that path, but I did get a lot of follow-up questions afterward. We're like, why can't you guys put these fires out the same way that we've been doing it for a long time? Well, I mean, we know it, but there are a lot of people that don't understand it. Now we're dealing with a chemistry experiment gone bad versus dealing with an accidental fire, right? So that was a piece that I kind of intentionally stayed away from. There are a lot of people that were forward thinking that asked those questions afterwards. And I said, at the end of the day, more, what provisions do we currently have in the codes and standards to help us? I mean, we're getting that from